Shh! Do not move. Look, my daughter whispered. I bent down and froze in horror. Soon my mother-in-law would regret everything. Mom, quickly to the bathroom. My 7-year-old daughter Maya clutched my hand, her eyes wide with urgency. We were in the middle of Lenox Square, the most upscale shopping district in Atlanta, and Maya looked like she had seen a ghost. I rushed her into the nearest restroom, a lavish lounge with marble floors and floor-to-ceiling mirrors. Usually, I would have been admiring the decor, but Maya dragged me into the handicap stall at the far end and locked the door. She put a finger to her lips, her small hand trembling. Shh! Do not move. Look, she whispered. Pointing at the gap beneath the stall partition, I bent down, peering through the gap, and my heart stopped. I knew those shoes. Christian Louboutin red bottoms, size 9 with the distinct scuff on the left heel. I knew them because I had bought them 2 weeks ago as a treat for myself after closing a massive audit, only for them to mysteriously vanish from my master closet. 3 days ago, standing right next to my stolen heels, were a pair of limited edition Gucci sneakers that I knew belonged to Amber, my sister-in-law. I was about to stand up and confront them when a voice I knew better than my own stopped me cold. Here, take this. $10,000. Mama Lucille's voice echoed off the marble tiles, distinct and imperious. It is that ungrateful Simone's Christmas bonus. She thought she hid it well in her wall safe, but she forgets who has the master key to her house. I covered my mouth to stifle a gasp. My mother-in-law had stolen my bonus straight out of my home. Amber giggled, the sound grating against my nerves. Thank you, Mama. You are the best. That stingy Simone never buys anything nice for us. She thinks she is so superior, just because she pays the mortgage. Dante says he is sick of her. When are we going to finally kick her out? Soon, honey. Mama, Lucille replied, her tone dripping with malice as soon as she signs over. The deed to the lake house. Dante has the papers ready. Once we have that asset secured, we will toss her and that brat Maya out on the street and move you in. Dante needs a wife who knows her place, not some forensic accountant who thinks her career makes her the man of the house. I did not cry. I did not scream. Instead, I quietly pulled out my phone and recorded the shoes and the conversation. My hand was steady, my breathing controlled. I am Simone, a 34-year-old forensic accountant. Finding hidden truths is what I do for a living. And today, my family just became my biggest case. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever discovered a betrayal so deep it forced you to become someone else entirely to survive. As they washed their hands, laughing about my impending homelessness, I opened my banking app on my phone. My husband Dante had a supplementary black card linked to my primary account, the one he used to flash status around town with one tap. I froze, it declined. Was about to be his new reality. I waited until the coast was clear before dragging a confused Maya out of the restroom. I splashed cold water on my face, took a deep breath, and walked out into the blinding Atlanta sun towards the parking lot. My hands were still shaking. Not from fear, but from a rage so cold it burned. I was halfway to my car when I saw it. The matte black Range Rover Autobiography. I paid the lease on every month, $2,500 a month to be exact. Leaning against it, looking every bit the successful real estate mogul in a suit. I had bought him was Dante, my husband. He was supposed to be at a site visit in Buckhead instead. He was playing chauffeur to the 2 women who were plotting my financial demise when he saw me. His eyes widened in panic, but he smoothed his expression instantly. Simone, what are you doing here? He asked, pushing off the car, trying to block my view of the back seat though. Already knew who was there. Shopping for Maya. I said, my voice flat, finding it hard to look at him without screaming. I thought you were meeting investors. I am, he lied smoothly. Mom and Amber just needed a ride. They were in the area. You know how it is? The back doors opened, and out stepped Mama Lucille and Amber. Mama Lucille adjusted her hat, her eyes zeroing in on the small waffle cone in Maya's hand. Ice cream, really? Simone. Mama Lucille scoffed, stepping into my personal space. You are teaching that child to be wasteful just like you. It is a $5 cone. Mama Lucille, I said, tightening my grip on Maya's hand. She got an A on her spelling test. $5 is $5. She snapped, poking a manicured finger into my chest. You know, Dante needs $50,000 by Friday to secure that commercial lot. But here you are, throwing money away on sugar. Do you not care about your husband's future? I stared at her incredulous. I pay the mortgage on the 5-bedroom house you all sleep in. I pay the insurance on this car. I pay the tuition for Maya, and I paid off your credit card debt last month. But I am the selfish one. I did not say that out loud. Instead, I looked at Dante, waiting for him to defend me, to tell his mother that I was the only reason we were not living in a 1-bedroom apartment. He looked away, checking his watch. Mom is right, babe. We need to tighten the belt. If this deal goes through, we will be set for life. You need to stop spending on frivolities. Then Amber stepped forward, smiling that saccharine smile that made my skin crawl. Oh, leave her alone, Dante. She is trying her best. Nice bag, by the way. Simone, is that the one from Target? It is so quaint. She was wearing a brand new Chanel classic flat bag, the lambskin leather gleaming in the sunlight. I knew exactly how much that bag cost, because I had seen the withdrawal on my secret notification alert 10 minutes ago. $5,200 charged to my emergency business account. Thank you, Amber, I said, my eyes locking onto the Chanel bag. Yours is stunning. Brand new, isn't it? She flushed slightly, pulling the bag behind her. Oh, this old thing. No, I have had it for ages, liar. I thought you bought it with my stolen bonus money 10 minutes ago. Let's go, Dante said, sensing the tension. He opened the car door for his mother. Get in. Simone, we will see you at home and have dinner ready by 6. I am bringing Marcus over. I stood in the exhaust fumes as they drove away in my car, with my money wearing my stolen peace of mind. That was the moment the last shred of love I had for Dante evaporated. They called me wasteful while robbing me blind. They called me selfish while living off my labor fine. If they wanted to see who really held the purse strings, I was about to show them exactly what happens when the bank closes permanently. That night, the air in our 5-bedroom Buckhead home was thick enough to choke on. I had ordered pizza for Maya and sent her to bed early, shielding her from the storm I knew was coming. Dante came home at 7:30, smelling of expensive cologne and the scotch he liked to drink when he was trying to look important. He loosened his tie and walked into the kitchen where I was sitting at the island, sipping a glass of water. He put on his best smile, the one that used to make my knees weak back in college. Hey, baby, he said, coming up behind me and massaging my shoulders. I am sorry about earlier. Mom can be a lot. Sometimes you know how she is. She just wants us to succeed. I stayed rigid under his touch, staring straight ahead. Look, Dante continued, his voice dropping to a seductive whisper, about that investment opportunity. I really need you to sign a check for $50,000 tonight. If I wire it first thing in the morning, we are in on the ground floor. This is it, Simone, the big break. I stood up, sliding out from his grip, and turned to face him. $50,000. I repeated, my voice devoid of emotion. Just like that. No business plan, no prospectus, just a check. Come on, Simone, he said, his smile faltering. Why do you always have to make everything so difficult? I am your husband. You are supposed to trust me. Trust is earned. Dante, I said, walking over to the fridge. I checked the accounts today. $50,000 is exactly what we have left in our liquid savings after someone drained the emergency fund. His face twitched. You are checking accounts now? Since when do you audit your own husband? Since my husband started treating our bank account like a personal casino, I said, slamming the fridge door shut. The answer is no. Dante, not a penny. The charm evaporated instantly, his face contorted into a mask of ugly rage. He slammed his fist onto the marble island, the sound echoing through the house like a gunshot. "You selfish woman," he shouted, spitting the words at me. "You are always trying to emasculate me, aren't you? You think because you bring in the paycheck you are the boss? Well, let me tell you something, Simone. You are failing as a wife." I stared at him, unmoved by his temper tantrum. "You are cold. You are calculating," he continued, stepping closer, looming over me. "And you know what else? You cannot even give me a son. Mom is right. You are a dead end, Simone. All you gave me was a daughter, while other women are out here building dynasties. You are just building spreadsheets. Maybe if you were more of a woman, I would not have to look elsewhere for respect." The comment about a son hit its mark. He knew how hard we had tried. He knew about the miscarriages before Maya, but now looking at his twisted face, I realized he did not care about our loss. He only cared about his legacy, his ego. I did not scream. I did not cry. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Get out of my face, Dante." He laughed a cruel, mocking sound. "I am going out. Do not wait up." As he stormed out, slamming the front door so hard the windows rattled, I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me. He thought he had won. He thought he had hurt me, but all he had done was give me the final push I needed. I walked down the hall to my home office and locked the heavy oak door. I sat down at my desk and powered up my workstation. This was not my laptop for browsing recipes. This was my beast, a custom-built rig running top-tier forensic accounting software. Usually I used it to hunt down corporate fraud to find money hidden by CEOs in offshore accounts. Tonight I was hunting Dante Jenkins. I cracked my knuckles and began typing password. Accepted system ready. Let the audit begin. My fingers flew across the keyboard, my eyes scanning lines of code and transaction histories with the precision of a surgeon cutting out a tumor. I bypassed the standard joint checking account. I knew that was just for show. That was the decoy I left for Dante, to feel like a big man buying drinks. I went straight for the jugular, the high-yield savings account. I had set up the day Maya was born, the fund that was supposed to be untouchable, the lockbox for her future. I clicked the balance tab and the air left my lungs. It should have read $82,400.50. Instead, it read $400. My vision blurred for a second. $80,000 gone, vanished just 2 days ago via an immediate wire transfer that was 4 years of tuition. That was my daughter's freedom. That was my blood sweat. And sleepless nights liquidated in a single click. I did not scream. I did not throw the monitor. I went cold. I clicked on the transaction details. The recipient was listed as a domestic entity called L&A Holdings, LLC, L&A. I rolled the letters over in my mind, trying to make sense of the acronym, and then it hit me with the force of a physical blow. L for Lucille, A for Amber. A cold chill raked down my spine. This was not just Dante being reckless with money. This was not him trying to fund a bad investment. This was theft. This was grand larceny orchestrated by my mother-in-law and my sister-in-law. They had formed a literal corporation to rob me. I pulled up the Georgia Secretary of State Business Registry. Within seconds, I had the filing L&A. Holdings was registered 3 days ago. The registered agent address was a UPS store in Buckhead, right next to Mama Lucille's favorite beauty salon. The pieces clicked together with the sickening precision of a loaded gun. They were not just using me, they were liquidating me. They were stripping me for parts, before discarding me like a used car. I looked at the picture of Maya on my desk, her smiling face oblivious to the war that had just started. They stole from a 7-year-old. They stole from their own blood to fund their delusions of grandeur. That was their fatal mistake. You can cheat on me, Dante. You can lie to me. But you do not steal from my child. I picked up my burner phone, the one I kept for sensitive client work, and dialed a number. I bet not used since my days working heavy fraud cases in Chicago. Jack picked up on the second ring, his voice gravelly and alert. Simone, long time no see. Trouble. I need a full workup, Jack, I said, my voice steady and terrifyingly calm. Assets, movements, and surveillance subjects are Dante Jenkins and Amber Jenkins. I think they are laundering stolen funds through a shell company called L&A Holdings. Jack let out a low whistle. Family. Yes, family, I replied, staring at the empty balance on the screen. Scorched earth policy, he asked, knowing my methods. No, I whispered, my eyes hardening as I looked at the transaction. Timestamp ashes. Jack. I want nothing left but ashes. The next morning, the doorbell rang with the impatient rhythm I knew too well. I checked the security camera feed on my phone. It was Amber standing on my porch, adjusting her oversized sunglasses, looking like she was auditioning for a reality show on Bravo. I opened the door and she breezed past me without waiting for an invitation, the cloying scent of expensive vanilla perfume trailing behind her, combined with something else, something familiar that made my stomach turn. Good morning, Simone, she chirped, dropping her new Chanel bag onto my pristine white sofa. The one I had told her 1,000 times was off limits for outdoor accessories. I was just in the neighborhood, thought I would check in on you. Dante said, you were acting hysterical last night about money. I am fine. Amber. Just busy. Working. Unlike some people, I said, closing the door and leaning against it, watching her prowl around my living room, picking up crystal figurines and inspecting them like she was at a pawn shop, evaluating their resale value. She turned to face me, flipping her long hair over her shoulder. And that is when I saw it. A dark purple bruise blossoming on the side of her neck, a hickey unmistakable and fresh right above her collarbone. She saw me looking and smirked, touching the spot with feigned shyness. Oh, ignore that, she giggled. Marcus was just insatiable last night. You know how the Jenkins men are when they want something. They just take it until they are satisfied. I walked closer. Invading her personal space, she smelled of vanilla. Yes, but underneath that layer was the sharp, musky scent of oudwood by Tom Ford. I knew that scent intimately because I bought a $300 bottle for Dante 3 weeks ago for our anniversary. It was his signature scent. It was the only cologne he wore. Marcus did not wear Tom Ford. Marcus wore Old Spice and the scent of desperation. You are right, Amber, I said, my voice dangerously low, keeping my face neutral. The Jenkins men do have very distinct appetites, don't they? She stepped back slightly unsettled by my proximity and the coldness in my eyes, but she quickly recovered, masking her unease with cruelty. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my simple black leggings and messy bun with a look of pure, unadulterated disgust. You know, Simone, speaking of appetites, you really should put some effort in, she said, gesturing vaguely at my entire existence. Dante was complaining just the other day that you are really letting yourself go, he said. You are starting to look like a tired old auntie instead of a trophy wife. Men like Dante need visual stimulation. Honey, not a woman who looks like she lives inside a spreadsheet all day. I felt a vein throb in my temple. She was standing in the house. I paid for, wearing my husband's scent. Insulting me to my face while helping him steal my daughter's future. She thought she was the queen bee stinging a helpless victim. She had no idea she was poking a sleeping dragon. I smiled a tight, thin smile that did not reach my eyes. Thank you for the advice, Amber. I will definitely look into a makeover. I have been planning some major changes around here anyway. You have absolutely no idea. She looked at me suspicious, but arrogant. Good. Maybe start with some highlights and lose 5 pounds. We have Mama Lucille's big birthday party coming up, and she does not want you ruining the family photos with your frumpy energy. Get out of my house, Amber, I said, walking to the door and holding it open before I do something unchristian, she huffed, grabbing her stolen bag. Touchy. No wonder he prefers working late. As she sashayed down the walkway back to her car, shaking her hips, I locked the door and leaned my forehead against the cool wood. She thought she was spying on me, checking for weakness. Instead, she just gave me the final piece of motivation I needed to bury them all. 2 hours after Amber left my house, my phone buzzed with a summons from Mama Lucille. It was not a request. It was a command. Mandatory family meeting at her house, immediately attendance required, or face excommunication from the Sunday dinner table. Usually I would have rolled my eyes and made an excuse, but today I wanted to look the devil in the eye, so I put on my best blazer and drove over. When I walked into her living room, it felt like entering a courtroom where the verdict had already been decided. Mama Lucille sat in her high-backed velvet armchair, looking every inch the matriarch, holding a gold-embossed notebook. Dante sat on her right, looking smug, and Amber sat on her left, looking bored, filing her nails. "Sit down, Simone," Mama Lucille commanded, pointing to a hard wooden chair opposite them. "We need to discuss the upcoming schedule, specifically my 65th birthday. Jubilee." I sat down, crossing my legs. "Jubilee?" I asked, keeping my face blank. "I thought we were just doing a family dinner." "A dinner?" she scoffed, clutching her pearls as if I had suggested we eat out of a dumpster. "This is my 65th, Simone. It is a milestone. The entire church council is expecting a celebration. Pastor Jenkins has already cleared his calendar. I need to show them that the Jenkins family is thriving, especially after those nasty rumors about Marcus's business troubles. We need to wash our face in front of the community. We need to show power." She slid the notebook across the coffee table toward me. "Here is the guest list. 200 people, the crème de la crème of Atlanta society. I want the grand ballroom at the St. Regis, seafood towers, flowing champagne, a live jazz band, and a custom 3-tier cake with gold leaf detailing." I flipped through the list. Judges, deacons, business owners, people whose opinion mattered more to Lucille than her own integrity. I did a quick mental calculation based on her demands. "This is going to cost at least $30,000. "Mama, Lucille," I said, closing the notebook, "who is paying for this?" She looked at me as if I had asked who was paying for the sun to rise. "You are, of course," she said, her voice sharp and cold. "Me." I looked at Dante. "Why isn't your son paying for his mother's party? He is the big real estate mogul, isn't he? Shouldn't the visionary handle the finances for the Jubilee?" Dante shifted his tie tight around his neck. "My capital is tied up in the new development, Simone. You know that liquidity is tight until we close. Stop trying to count my pockets, Mama." Lucille leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Listen to me, Simone. You have a good corporate job. You have no children to support besides Maya. You have the money. Do not be stingy if you refuse to honor your mother-in-law. After I let you into this family, you are nothing but an ungrateful daughter-in-law, a biblical failure. Everyone at church will know how you abandoned me in my golden year. Do you want that shame on your head?" Amber chimed in, blowing on her nails. "Yeah, Simone, stop being so cheap. 30,000 is nothing to you. Think of it as rent for being part of this legacy. You should be honored. Mama is letting you plan it." I looked at the three of them, greedy, desperate, and utterly blind. They wanted a stage. They wanted an audience to applaud their fake success and their stolen wealth. They wanted the St. Regis perfect. I felt a smile spread across my face. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator watching a trap snap shut. "You are right, Mama Lucille," I said, my voice smooth as silk. "You deserve the best. I will handle everything, the venue, the food, the invites. I will pay for it all. It will be geese, the night you remember until your dying breath, Mama." Lucille clapped her hands, delighted by her victory. "Finally, you are seeing reason. Make sure my dress code is black. Tie strictly." "Oh, do not worry, Mama." I stood up, picking up my purse. "I will make sure everyone is looking at you. It will be the event of the century." I walked out of her house feeling lighter than air. They wanted a show. I would give them a show, just not the one they rehearsed. My phone buzzed on the mahogany desk, vibrating against the wood like a warning shot. It was the secure notification from Jack, my private investigator. Subject line: the smoking gun. I took a sip of my black coffee, steadying my hands before clicking the file open. I thought I was prepared for infidelity. I thought I was ready to see my husband with another woman. But nothing could have prepared me for the depravity staring back at me from the high-resolution screen. The first folder contained photos taken with a telephoto lens. They were crisp and undeniable. Dante and Amber walking into the luxury condo I had discovered earlier, but they were not just walking. Dante's hand was possessively gripping Amber's waist, pulling her close. In the elevator mirrors they were kissing, with a familiarity that spoke of years, not months. I clicked the next file. An audio recording. Jack had managed to bug the condo, knowing Dante's arrogance would make him careless. I put on my headphones and pressed play. The sound of ice clinking in glasses filled my ears, followed by Amber's voice. "I am tired of pretending, Dante," she whined. "When are we going to tell Marcus the truth? He keeps trying to touch me, and it makes my skin crawl. I want to be with you properly. Soon, baby." Dante's voice was smooth, dismissive. "Just let me secure the deed from Simone. Once I have the lake house, we will have enough equity to divorce her and cut Marcus loose. Mom is handling the church folks. She already has the story ready about how Simone cheated on me." I felt a cold shiver. But the next voice on the recording stopped my heart. It was Mama Lucille. She was there in the condo with them, condoning this madness. "Patience, Amber," Mama Lucille snapped. "Marcus is useful for now. He gives the boy a name, but we all know who Elijah really belongs to. Look at him. He has the Jenkins nose. Dante's nose, not that weak chin Marcus has." I froze, staring at the screen. Jack had included a PDF report titled Paternity Analysis. He had managed to secure a discarded pacifier from Amber's son Elijah, a sweet 2-year-old boy I had held in my arms. A boy I had bought birthday gifts for, a boy I thought was my nephew. I opened the document. Probability of paternity between Dante Jenkins and Elijah Jenkins, 99.99%. The room spun. Marcus wasn't just being cheated on, he was raising his brother's son, thinking it was his own, and Mama Lucille knew. She not only knew, she orchestrated it. She treated Elijah like the golden child, because he was Dante's offspring, her favorite son's bloodline, while she treated my daughter Maya like an afterthought, because she was a girl, and because she belonged to me. This was sick. It was biblical in its betrayal. They were keeping Marcus around as a glorified babysitter, while Dante played the patriarch of 2 households funded by my paycheck. I looked at the photo of Elijah attached to the file. The resemblance to Dante was undeniable, now that I knew the truth. The arrogance in the eyes, the set of the jaw, they had played us all. Marcus was the cuckold I was. The bank, and Dante and Amber were the stars of Mama Lucille's twisted little soap opera. I closed the laptop gently. The rage I felt before was a candle flame compared to the inferno burning in my chest. Now, this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about destroying a man's life and mocking my daughter's existence. I picked up my phone and sent a text to Marcus. Just 3 words, "Come see me," he replied instantly, asking if everything was okay. I did not answer. Instead, I forwarded the audio file to my secure cloud storage and deleted it from the phone. They wanted to play games with bloodlines. Well, I was about to spill some blood, the metaphorical kind. For now, I walked to the mirror and fixed my hair, applying a fresh coat of red lipstick, war paint for the modern woman. They wanted a villain, so I would become the villain they feared. I checked my watch. 2 hours until Marcus arrived, plenty of time to print the DNA results on heavy cardstock. Getting the truth was one thing, delivering it was an art form, and I was about to paint a masterpiece using their secrets as the ink. It was 1 p.m. on a Tuesday, and while I was in my office analyzing the forensic trail of my husband's infidelity, Dante was holding court at Chop's Lobster Bar, one of the most expensive steakhouses in Buckhead. He was sitting with three other men aspiring moguls who talked a big game about crypto and real estate development, but mostly lived off their wives or inheritances. Dante had ordered the Wagyu steak and a bottle of Cabernet that cost more than my first car. He was celebrating the deal he thought he was about to close, the one funded by the $50,000 he believed he had bullied out of me the night before. I knew all of this because I had access to his calendar, and I knew his habits. He liked to flash wealth before he actually secured it. When the check arrived, Dante did not even look at the total. He just tossed the heavy black metal card onto the silver tray with a dismissive wave of his hand. That card was an authorized user card linked directly to my primary business account, the account I had flagged as compromised exactly 1 hour ago. The waiter took the tray and walked away. Dante leaned back in his chair, laughing at a joke one of his friends made, loosening his tie, feeling like the king of Atlanta. 5 minutes later, the waiter returned. He was not smiling anymore. He leaned down, whispering discreetly, but in a quiet restaurant. Whispers carry. I am sorry, sir. The card was declined. Dante laughed, a loud, nervous sound that drew eyes from nearby tables. Try it again. It is a black card. There is no limit. I did, sir. The waiter said, his voice a little firmer. The terminal says the card has been reported lost or stolen by the primary account holder. We have instructions to confiscate it. Dante's face went from confident bronze to a sickly shade of gray. Lost, stolen. Give me that. Back I cannot, sir. It is bank policy. Do you have another form of payment? Dante patted his pockets, knowing full well they were empty. He never carried cash, and his personal debit card had been overdrawn for weeks because he spent all his allowance on colognes and lunches like this one. 1 second, he stammered, standing up so fast he knocked his water glass over. Let me make a call. My wife must have pressed the wrong button on the app. Women and technology, you know. His friends did not laugh. They exchanged looks, the kind of looks that said, we know a fraud when we see one. My phone lit up on my desk, face up next to my keyboard. Dante calling. I watched it ring, the screen pulsating with his panic. I took a slow sip of my tea and let it go to voicemail. He called again and again, 3 times in a row. I imagined him standing in the vestibule of the restaurant, sweating through his silk shirt, the waiter tapping his foot, his friends checking their watches, wondering if they were going to have to cover the bill for the man who claimed to be a millionaire. Finally, the calls stopped. I checked the shared family location app just to see the humiliation unfold in real time. Dante's dot stayed at the restaurant for another 30 minutes. Then another dot approached, moving fast from the direction of the church. It was Mama Lucille. I laughed out loud in my empty office. Dante, a 36-year-old man who claimed to be the patriarch of his family, had to call his mommy to come pay for his steak lunch because his wife cut off his allowance. I heard later from a mutual friend who happened to be dining there that it was a spectacle. Lucille marched in, wearing her Sunday hat, loudly complaining about incompetent banks and jealous wives while she wrote a check. Dante stood in the corner, head down, while his so-called friends snickered behind their hands. They made jokes about him needing a permission slip to leave the table. They called him a mama's boy loud enough for the host to hear. When Dante finally came home that evening, the rage radiating off him was palpable. The front door flew open with enough force to crack the plaster near the hinges. He stormed into the living room where I was calmly reading a magazine. "You did that on purpose!" he roared, his eyes, bulging veins popping in his neck. "You humiliated me, Simone, in front of my investors, in front of the staff. You reported the card stolen." I did not look up from the magazine, simply turning a page. "I told you, Dante. There was suspicious activity on the account, a $5,000 purchase at Chanel, since you swore you were at a construction site and not buying handbags. I assumed your card was cloned. I was just protecting our assets." "You know exactly what you did," he screamed, kicking the ottoman over. You cut me off. You made me call my mother to pay a $400 bill. Do you have any idea how that looks? It looks like you cannot afford the lifestyle you are living, I said, finally looking up at him, my face bored. Maybe you should get a job. Dante, one that pays a salary instead of costing me money. He lunged forward, stopping just inches from my face, shaking with the effort not to hit me. You will pay for this, Simone, when I get my money, when that deal closes. I am going to make you regret the day you were born. I stood up, not backing down an inch. Get some sleep, Dante. You look tired from all that winning. The next evening, Dante stormed through the front door, his rage a palpable force, sucking the air out of the room. I was sitting on the beige linen sofa in the living room, my laptop open, a ring light illuminating my face. He didn't notice the setup at first, blinded by the humiliation of having his mother pay for his lunch and his friends laughing at him. His hand was raised, fist clenched, ready to strike. He took 2 aggressive steps towards me, his face contorted in a snarl that promised violence. "What the hell do you think you are doing?" he roared, raising his arm higher. I didn't flinch. Instead, I smiled brightly at the webcam and said, "Oh, look who it is. My wonderful husband. Just getting home from a long day of conquering the real estate world. Everyone say hi to Dante." Dante froze his fist mid-air, eyes darting to the screen where a grid of 12 faces stared back at him. Partners from the firm, clients, and a few senior auditors. I was hosting a late-night strategy session with the London team. Live. His face went from red to pale. In a heartbeat, he lowered his arm, smoothing his tie, forcing a sickly grin onto his face. "Hi, everyone," he stammered, his voice cracking slightly. "Sorry to interrupt, honey, I didn't realize you were on a call." "It is okay, darling," I said, my voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Come, give me a kiss. They were just asking about your new venture." He walked over stiffly like a puppet on strings. He leaned down to kiss my cheek, but instead of a kiss, he pressed his lips to my ear and whispered in a voice so cold it made my skin crawl. "You think you are clever, locking me out, humiliating me? Wait until this call is over, Simone. I am going to teach you a lesson you will never forget." I pulled back, still smiling for the camera, looking him dead in the eye. "Oh, Dante is such a joker," I said to the silent audience. "He is always teasing me about working too hard. Go get changed. Honey, dinner is in the oven." He straightened up, nodding at the screen like a bobblehead. "Nice to meet you all. Carry on." He walked out of the room, his back stiff with suppressed fury. I watched him go, knowing he wouldn't dare touch me now, not with 12 witnesses who could ruin his reputation with a single email, but the threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I finished the call calmly. Closing the laptop only when the screen went black did I let out the breath I had been holding. My hands were shaking slightly, but not from fear. From adrenaline. He had shown his hand. He was willing to get physical when his ego was bruised. I stood up and walked to the kitchen where I could hear him banging pots and pans, trying to intimidate me with noise. I leaned against the doorframe, watching him. "You should be careful, Dante," I said quietly. "Stress is bad for your heart, especially with all that red meat you eat." He spun around, a knife in his hand, chopping vegetables with violent force. "Do not push me. Simone, you are playing a dangerous game." "I am not playing," I said, walking past him to grab a water bottle. "I am winning. You just haven't realized it yet." He glared at me, the knife still in his hand, but he didn't move. He knew I had the upper hand for now, but a wounded animal is dangerous, and Dante was bleeding ego all over my kitchen floor. The next morning, I walked into the law offices of Sterling and Associates located on the 42nd floor of the Bank of America Plaza. The view of Atlanta was breathtaking. But I was not there for the scenery. I was there to detonate a nuclear bomb under my husband's feet. Sitting across from me was Marcus Sterling. a real estate attorney known for being a shark, and Mr. Henderson, the developer I had contacted earlier. "You are sure about this, Simone?" Mr. Sterling asked, looking over the deed. "The house is fully in your name, purchased 3 years prior to the marriage. Prenuptial agreement is solid. I am sure," I said, my voice steady. "Dante thinks he owns that house because he hangs his suits in the closet and parks his car in the driveway. He forgets that I bought it with my inheritance and my hard work long before he decided to grace me with his presence." Mr. Henderson tapped the table. "The land value is astronomical. We plan to raise the structure and put up luxury condos, so the condition of the house does not matter." "That is perfect," I said, "because I'm not selling you a home. Mr. Henderson, I am selling you a crime scene of a marriage." I picked up the pen, the black ink glinting under the fluorescent lights. "There is one condition," I said, pausing before signing the purchase agreement. "The closing date needs to be specific." "Name it," Mr. Henderson said, leaning back. "The 25th of next month." I said the date of Mama Lucille's 65th birthday. Jubilee. Both men looked at each other, confused. But I continued, my voice dropping to a register of absolute authority. "And I want a specific clause added to the contract. Vacant possession upon closing, specifically at 8 p.m. on that date. Absolute possession transfers to you immediately. Any personal property, furniture, clothing, electronics, or vehicles left on the premises at 8:01 p.m. becomes the sole property of the development company to be disposed of as trash." Mr. Sterling raised an eyebrow. "You want us to throw out their stuff?" "I want you to evict them," I clarified, leaning forward. "Dante, his mother, and his mistress will be at a party that night celebrating their own greatness. I want them to come home to changed locks and their belongings in a dumpster, or better yet, haul it all away before they even get back." Mr. Henderson smiled a slow, predatory grin. "I like your style, Simone. Consider it done." I signed the papers. The scratching of the pen on the paper was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It sounded like freedom. It sounded like justice. Dante was running around Atlanta, playing the big shot, begging for $50,000, unaware that the roof over his head had just been sold out from under him for $2 million. I stood up, shaking their hands. "Thank you, gentlemen." As I walked to the elevator, I checked my watch. Dante would be waking up about now, probably hungover from drinking away his anger. He would walk into the kitchen expecting breakfast, expecting the house to always be there. He had no idea that he was already a trespasser in his own life. I had just turned his castle into a ticking time bomb, and the countdown had officially begun. It was Tuesday evening when Dante's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, vibrating against the granite, with an urgency that made him jump. I was chopping vegetables, watching him out of the corner of my eye, feigning interest in the pot roast while tracking his every move. He picked up the phone, read the message, and his face went pale, wiping a sheen of sweat from his forehead. I knew exactly what the message said because I had cloned his phone to my secure iPad earlier that day. It was a text from Amber, and it was demanding. "My Honda is embarrassing me at the tennis club," she had written, followed by 3 angry emojis. "I need a G-Wagon white by Saturday, or I am telling Marcus everything about us." The audacity was breathtaking. She was demanding a 6-figure car from a man who currently could not buy a sandwich without his mother's help. But Dante did not look angry. He looked desperate. He looked like a rat trapped in a corner looking for a hole. He disappeared into his home office, and I heard the printer whirring to life. 10 minutes later, he walked back into the kitchen, holding a stack of crisp, warm papers he put on. That charming smile, the one that looked more like a grimace these days, his eyes darting around the room, avoiding mine. "Hey, babe," he said, sliding the papers across the island, interrupting my cooking. "I need you to sign these real quick. It is just some updated insurance paperwork for the house," the broker called and said. "Our premium might go up if we do not lock in this new rate tonight. It is a formality, really. Just sign where the sticky notes are." I wiped my hands on a towel and picked up the pen. He hovered over me, practically vibrating with anxiety, trying to rush me. "Just sign there, honey," he urged, pointing at the line. Dinner smells great. Let's get this done so we can eat. I looked at the documents to an untrained eye. They might look like standard forms. Dense paragraphs of legal jargon designed to make people's eyes glaze over. But I am a forensic accountant. I read fine print for a living. I eat legal disclaimers for breakfast. My eyes scanned the header code at the bottom left corner. Form 1003, Uniform Residential Loan Application. He was not updating our insurance. He was trying to take out a second mortgage on my house, a home equity line of credit for $200,000. Against the property value, he was trying to leverage the roof over my daughter's head to buy his mistress a luxury SUV to keep her quiet. The rage flared hot and fast in my chest, threatening to boil over if I screamed now. If I threw the papers in his face, he would know I was on to him. He would know the game was up, and I needed him to feel safe. Until the 25th, I needed him to think he was still the puppet master, while I cut his strings one by one. I tapped the pen against my chin, feigning confusion, looking up at him with wide, innocent eyes. "Oh, Dante, this looks complicated," I said, flipping to the signature page where he had conveniently hidden the loan terms under a yellow sticky note. "You know how particular I am about legal documents. This clause here about the lien holder seems different than our last policy." He stepped closer, his cologne suffocating me. "It is standard boilerplate. Simone, just sign it. Do you want our insurance to get cancelled? Why do you always have to analyze everything? Just be a partner for once." I put the pen down gently on the counter. "I cannot sign this without a notary present." "Dante." I lied, my voice steady and sweet. "It is not legally binding for property amendments in Georgia without a witness stamp. You know that if we get audited and the signatures are not notarized, we could lose the coverage." He froze, his jaw working. He knew I was right about the notary requirement for a mortgage. Even if he was lying about it being insurance, I can get a notary. "Tomorrow," I promised, patting his hand. "Let's do it properly, babe. We do not want any mistakes with our biggest asset." "Do we leave it on the desk? I will look it over tonight." He snatched the papers back, frustration radiating off him like heat. "Fine, tomorrow, but do not make me wait, Simone. I have a lot riding on this." He stormed out of the kitchen, taking his fraudulent loan application with him. I watched him go, knowing that by tomorrow that document would be the least of his worries. He wanted to gamble with my house. I was about to show him that the house always wins. While Dante slept upstairs dreaming of the G-Wagon he thought he was going to buy with equity stolen from my house, I was wide awake in my office staring at the blue glow of my monitors. Usually I used my forensic skills to save Fortune 500 companies from white-collar criminals tonight. I was using them to bury my husband under a mountain of federal charges. I pulled up the file labeled Project Retribution and began the final assembly of the evidence packet. This was not a divorce filing. This was a criminal referral to the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division. I laid out the digital paper trail like a map of his destruction. First, there was the $80,000 stolen from Maya's college fund, transferred to L&A Holdings LLC. Dante had classified this in his personal ledger as a business loan for startup capital. But my analysis showed zero business activity for L&A Holdings. No products, no services, no revenue. Just a direct pass-through entity used to purchase the luxury condo for Amber. That is called layering in the world of money laundering, moving illicit funds to distance them from their source. Next, I attached the receipts for the lifestyle expenses he had claimed were deductible. Business entertainment, the $5,000 Chanel bag for Amber, the $300 steak lunches, the lease payments on his Range Rover, all paid for with funds commingled with what he claimed were investment assets. He had failed to report the gifts to Amber as taxable income, and he had certainly failed to pay taxes on the money he siphoned from our joint accounts, which legally constituted income once he moved it to his sole proprietorship. I opened Form 211, the application for award for original information, basically the whistleblower form. I filled in every field with malicious precision. Name of taxpayer, Dante Jenkins. Alleged violation, income tax, evasion, money, laundering, wire fraud. I uploaded the bank statements highlighting the flow of money, the withdrawal from my savings, the deposit into L&A, holdings, and the subsequent cashier's check used to buy the condo, deeded to Amber. I connected the dots so clearly, a first-year auditor could see the pattern. He wasn't just a bad husband, he was a tax cheat. He was hiding assets and living a lifestyle his reported income of $0 could not support. I added a special note about Mama Lucille, listing her as a co-conspirator. Since her name was on the LLC formation documents, she thought she was just helping her son hide money from his wife. She did not realize she was signing her name to a federal crime. I hovered my mouse over the submit button, my heart pounding, a slow, steady rhythm. Dante always bragged about being a boss, about understanding how the world worked. But he forgot the golden rule of American business. You do not mess with the IRS. I clicked. Submit. A small confirmation window popped up. Your report has been received. Thank you for your assistance. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a cold satisfaction settle in my bones. He was worried about a notary for a loan application. He should have been worried about the federal agents who would be auditing his entire existence. I had just turned his financial life into a crime scene, and I was the only one with the yellow tape. Sunday morning arrived with the heavy toll of church bells calling the faithful to worship, but for me it was a summons. To the theater of the absurd. Mama Lucille had texted me at 6 a.m. with strict instructions: wear the royal blue dress. It matches Dante's tie. We need to look united before the jubilee. I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing down the fabric of a dress that cost more than my first car, feeling less like a wife and more like a prop in a twisted play. Dante was already downstairs, pacing in his navy suit, checking his watch, and likely texting Amber about her G-Wagon demands. We drove to the Greater Vine Baptist Church in silence, the tension in the car thick enough to crack the windshield. When we pulled up, Mama Lucille was waiting on the steps, looking like the Queen Mother in a hat, wide enough to block out the sun. She grabbed Dante's arm, pulling him close, then gestured for me to take his other side. "Smile, Simone," she hissed through her teeth. "People are watching. Stop looking so sour. The Lord does not like an ungrateful spirit." I pasted a smile on my face, a rictus of obedience as we walked down the center aisle, heads turning, whispers fluttering like moths behind fans. Look at the Jenkins family, so blessed, so prosperous. They did not know the car outside was about to be repossessed, or that the man waving at them was a tax cheat. We took our seats in the front pew, reserved for high-ranking families. Mama Lucille sat between us holding court, but the real show started 10 minutes later when the heavy oak doors opened and Amber walked in. She was not wearing her usual club attire. She was dressed demurely in white, carrying little Elijah on her hip. Marcus trailed behind her, looking weary and oblivious, holding a diaper bag that clearly contained secrets of its own. Amber marched straight to our pew, bypassing the empty seats in the back. She squeezed in next to Dante, her thigh pressing against his, the scent of her perfume clashing with the church incense. Mama Lucille immediately reached out her hands, snatching Elijah from Amber's arms, with a possessiveness that made my skin crawl. "Oh, look at my grandbaby," she cooed loud enough for the choir to hear. "Look at this blessing." She lifted the boy up, turning him so the congregation could see his face. Then she said the words that made bile rise in my throat, searing and hot. "Look at him," she announced, beaming at Dante. "Doesn't he look just like his Uncle Dante, y'all? The Jenkins genes are strong in this one. He has Dante's eyes, his nose. It is like looking at a little clone." A ripple of laughter went through the church. "Amen, sister," someone shouted from the back. "The family resemblance is undeniable." I sat there frozen, my hands clenched in my lap, until my knuckles turned white. It was not a joke. It was a confession hiding in plain sight. She was parading Dante's illegitimate son in front of God and the entire congregation, mocking Marcus, mocking me, daring anyone to see the truth. Dante chuckled nervously, reaching out to tickle the boy's chin. "Hey there, little man." Amber looked at me over Elijah's head, a smirk playing on her lips that said he is mine, and everyone knows it, but you. I felt the nausea roil in my stomach, threatening to spill over. I wanted to stand up and scream to pull out the DNA test and plaster it on the pulpit, but I did not. I swallowed the bile, forced my breathing to steady, and looked straight ahead at the cross, thinking about the wrath that was to come. They thought this was their moment of glory, but all I saw was evidence piling up for the final judgment day. The following Tuesday, Marcus showed up at my office, unexpected. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. Dark circles under his eyes, his shirt wrinkled. Usually, Marcus was the softer brother, the one who tried to keep the peace, while Dante burned bridges. But today he looked brittle, like one wrong word would shatter him into 1,000 pieces. "Simone, do you have a minute?" he asked, standing in the doorway, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "I didn't want to bother you at home with Dante being so stressed about the deal." "Come in, Marcus," I said, closing the laptop where I was finalizing the asset forfeiture list. "Have a seat. You look terrible." He sat down heavily, running a hand over his face. "It is Amber Simone. She is different lately. Cold, she is always gone, says she is at yoga or with her girlfriends. But she comes home smelling different, not like sweat, like cologne, and she won't let me touch her. She says she is tired, but I hear her on the phone late at night whispering. I watched him. This man who loved a woman who was actively destroying him. This man who was raising a son. That wasn't his. I felt a pang of genuine pity. But pity wouldn't save him. Only the truth would, and the truth had to be seen to be believed. She says, I am paranoid. Marcus continued, his voice cracking. She says, I am insecure because business is slow, but I feel it in my gut, Simone. Something is wrong. Is she seeing someone? I could have told him right then. I could have shown him the DNA test, the photos, the bank transfers. But he would have denied it. He would have defended his brother. Because that is what families do. They protect their own, even when their own are monsters. He needed to see the betrayal with his own eyes. He needed to watch the knife go in. I opened my drawer and pulled out a small notepad. I wrote down an address, the Ritz-Carlton on Peachtree Street. Room 412, Wednesday, 2 p.m. I tore the page off and slid it across the desk to him. What is this? Marcus asked, picking up the paper, his brow furrowing. I cannot say much right now, Marcus. I said, my voice soft but firm. But if you want to know why your wife is cold, if you want to know where she goes when she says she is at yoga, go to this address at this time. He looked at the paper, then at me. Fear dawning in his eyes. Is she meeting someone? Simone, is it bad? It is worse than you think. I said honestly, but do not ask me any more questions. Just promise me one thing. Do not confront them. Do not make a scene. Wait, trust me, Marcus, the timing matters. He nodded slowly, folding the paper and putting it in his pocket, his hand trembling slightly. Thank you, Simone. I think I watched him leave, a man walking towards his own execution. He didn't know it yet. But I had just handed him the key to his freedom. It would hurt like hell, but it would cut the cancer out of his life once and for all. And I needed him angry. I needed his rage to fuel the fire I was about to light under the entire Jenkins family tree. The front door opened, but this time there was no slamming, no yelling. Dante walked in with a swagger that terrified me more than his rage ever did. He was whistling a jaunty tune, twirling a set of keys in his hand. He looked at me sitting on the sofa with a look of pity that made my skin crawl. Pack your bags, Simone, he said, tossing a manila envelope onto the coffee table. You are leaving tonight? I stared at the envelope, my heart doing a slow, heavy thud. What is this, Dante? It is a court order, he said, smirking, an emergency motion for temporary separation due to marital misconduct. The judge agreed that your financial abuse cutting off my cards constitutes a hostile environment. You have 2 hours to vacate the premises. Vacate my house. I picked up the document, my eyes scanning it with the speed of a professional auditor. It was a joke, a bad Photoshop job. The court seal was pixelated, the judge's signature was a stamp, and the legal statute cited didn't even exist in the state of Georgia. He had probably paid some paralegal $500 to type this up, thinking I was too stupid or too emotional to check the docket number. I looked up at him, ready to laugh in his face, ready to tear the paper in half. But then I stopped. This was it. This was the opening I needed. If he kicked me out, he would feel secure, he would move Amber in immediately, and the trap would be fully set. I forced my lower lip to tremble. I summoned tears from the deep well of exhaustion living in my bones. "Oh, Dante, please no," I sobbed, dropping the papers, my hands shaking theatrically. "You cannot do this. Where will I go with Maya? It is a school night." "Not my problem," Dante said, checking his watch, callous and cold. "Go to a hotel. Go to your mother's. I do not care. Just get out. I need this space for my mental health." I stood up, wiping my eyes. Playing the broken wife? Perfectly fine. "Dante, if this is what the law says, I will follow it. I will go pack." He smirked, turning his back to pour himself a drink. "Make it quick, Simone. I have guests coming later." I ran upstairs to Maya's room. She was playing with her dolls, looking up with wide, fearful eyes when I burst in. "Mommy, what is wrong?" she asked, sensing my energy. "Nothing, baby. We are going on an adventure. Remember the secret mission I told you about? It starts now." I grabbed the 2 large suitcases I had left by the door. Dante didn't know that these bags were filled with old clothes, towels, and pillows. He didn't know that 3 days ago while he was at the barber, I had moved my jewelry, my passport, the hard drives with the evidence and every single item of sentimental value to a storage unit downtown. I wasn't leaving my life behind. I was leaving him an empty shell. I dragged the suitcases down the stairs, making a show of struggling. Dante watched me from the living room, sipping his drink, not offering to lift a finger. "Leave the keys on the table," he said, not even looking at me and the garage opener. I placed them on the console table, my hand lingering for a second. "Goodbye." "Dante," I whispered, meaningful and final. He waved a hand dismissively. "Just go. Simone, close the door behind you." I walked out into the cool night air, holding Maya's hand tight. We walked to my car, the only thing I was taking that he couldn't claim, as we pulled out of the driveway. I saw the lights of Amber's car turning onto the street. She was arriving, before my engine was even cold. Maya looked back at the house, tears in her eyes. "Mommy, are they stealing our house?" I looked in the rearview mirror, watching Amber's car pull into my spot. A fierce smile touching my lips. "No, baby," I said, turning onto the main road. "They are not stealing it. They are just keeping it warm for the bulldozers. Let's go to the Ritz-Carlton. Mommy needs room service." I barely made it to the end of the block before I saw Amber's headlights sweep across the lawn. She did not wait for my engine to cool. She did not wait for the dust to settle. She pulled into the driveway like she was planting a flag on conquered territory. I watched through the live feed of the security cameras. I had not disconnected yet. I wanted to see it. I needed to witness the depths of their delusion so I could fully enjoy their destruction. Amber walked through the front door, dragging a Louis Vuitton suitcase that I knew was fake. She spun around in the foyer, arms wide, laughing like a hyena. She kicked off her shoes, sending them skidding across the hardwood floors. My hardwood floors. She walked straight to the living room and threw herself onto the white sofa, the one she had defiled with her presence just days ago. She pulled out her phone immediately, snapping a selfie with her feet up on the coffee table. I watched the notification pop up on my burner account a few seconds later. She posted it to her Instagram story, captioning it, "Finally kicked the wicked witch to the curb." The castle needs a queen, not a calculator. Hashtag new beginnings. Hashtag blessed. Blessed. I laughed a dry, hollow sound in the quiet of my car. She called larceny a blessing. 20 minutes later, Mama Lucille arrived. She did not knock. She used the key Dante had given her, the key I had paid for. She waddled in, carrying a store-bought cake, probably to celebrate her son's imaginary victory. "Look at this," she boomed, hugging Dante, who was pouring himself another drink. "Look at my boy, taking charge of his household. I told you, son. You just needed to be firm. You needed to show her who wears the pants." Dante preened, puffing out his chest like a rooster taking credit for the sunrise. "Yeah, Ma. I had to do it. She was suffocating me with her budgets. And her rules now. We can finally live like we deserve." Amber ran over, kissing Lucille on the cheek. "Oh, Mama, it is perfect, isn't it? The energy is so much better already." Lucille looked around, nodding approvingly. "We need to smudge the place, get rid of her spirit. But first we celebrate Dante. Open something nice." I watched Dante walk to the wine fridge. My wine fridge, the one temperature controlled to 55 degrees. He bypassed the cheap bottles. He bypassed the mid-range bottles. He reached all the way to the back and pulled out the dusty bottle with the gold label. My breath hitched. That was a 1996 Chateau Margaux worth $2,000. I had bought it at an auction, saving it for my 40th birthday, or maybe Maya's wedding. It was an investment. It was art. Dante pulled the cork with a wet pop and poured the dark ruby liquid into 3 glasses, filling them to the brim like it was grape juice. No breathing, no decanting, just gluttony, to family. Lucille toasted, raising her glass to the ones who really matter. To us. Amber squealed, clinking her glass against Dante's to the new lady of the house. They drank my wine, gulping it down, laughing, spilling drops on the white rug. They sat there planning redecorating, scheming about how to spend money they didn't have in a house they didn't own. I watched them on the small screen of my phone, feeling a strange sense of detachment. They looked so happy, so secure. They thought they had won the war, but they didn't know they were celebrating on the deck of the Titanic, and I had already hit the iceberg for them. "Drink up," I whispered to the screen. "Enjoy the vintage. It will be the last expensive thing you ever taste, because tomorrow the hangover starts, and it is going to last forever." The presidential suite at the Ritz-Carlton in Buckhead was quiet. A stark contrast to the chaos we had left behind hours ago. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the Atlanta skyline, glittering like diamonds against the velvet night sky. Dante probably imagined me crying in a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, clutching my purse and begging my mother for a place to stay. He had no idea I was sitting on a velvet chaise lounge, wrapped in a robe that cost more than his monthly car payment, sipping chamomile tea and watching my daughter sleep in a bed fit for royalty. I had booked this suite weeks ago under my maiden name, knowing exactly when the explosion would happen. I was not a victim fleeing a burning building. I was the arsonist watching the flames from a safe distance. This was not exile. It was a strategic repositioning. Maya stirred in the massive king-sized bed, rubbing her eyes. She looked so small, so innocent. Amidst the sea of white Egyptian cotton sheets, she sat up, clutching her favorite stuffed bear, the one thing I made sure to grab before we walked out the door. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice trembling in the dark room. "Are we homeless now?" I set my tea down and walked over to the bed, sitting on the edge, and pulling her into my arms. She smelled like lavender soap and childhood innocence, the scent grounding me in my purpose. "No, baby. We are not homeless," I said, smoothing her braids back from her forehead. "We are just on a vacation, a special secret vacation just for us." But Daddy said, "Get out." She sniffled, burying her face in my chest. "He threw our bags outside. He looked so mean." "Mommy, why did Daddy kick us out? Did I do something wrong?" My heart broke a clean, sharp fracture down the middle. This was the damage Dante did not care about. the trauma he was inflicting on his own flesh and blood, just to feel powerful. For a moment, he was willing to scar his daughter's spirit to satisfy his ego. I lifted her chin, forcing her to look at me. Her big brown eyes filled with tears. "Listen to me, Maya," I said, my voice fierce and steady. "Daddy did not kick us out. He thinks he did. But he is wrong. You and I are playing a game, a very smart game." "A game?" she asked, sniffing. "Yes," I said, wiping her tears away. "Imagine big stage like at the theater right now. Daddy and Grandma and Amber are on the stage acting out a play. They think they are the stars. They think they are running the show." "But where are we?" she asked, looking around the luxurious room. "We are in the director's chair, baby," I said, kissing her forehead. "We are letting them use the stage for the final act. We are letting them think they won, so they do not see what is coming next." "What comes next?" she whispered, her eyes wide. "Fireworks," I said, smiling a genuine smile for the first time that night. "Big, beautiful fireworks. Just for us. We are going to watch the show, and when the curtains close, we will be the only ones left standing." She nodded slowly, trusting me, the way only a child trusts a mother. "Okay, Mommy, I like fireworks." "Good. Now, go back to sleep tomorrow. We are ordering room service waffles with extra whipped cream." I watched her drift back to sleep, her breathing evening out. Dante thought he had taken my home, my dignity, and my place in the world. He did not realize that I carried my home in my ribcage and my dignity in my bank account. He was enjoying his stolen wine in a house that was already sold, while I was here, in a fortress of my own making, preparing to light the fuse that would blow his entire reality apart. 2 p.m. on a Wednesday, the lobby of the Ritz-Carlton was a symphony of hushed conversations and clinking china. I sat in a high-backed chair near a potted palm, hidden from view, but with a clear line of sight to the elevators. Marcus was standing by the reception desk, looking like a man about to jump off a cliff. He was checking his watch every 30 seconds, his leg bouncing nervously. He didn't know I was there. I needed to make sure he followed through. At 2:10, the elevator doors chimed and opened. Laughter spilled out first, a low throaty chuckle, followed by a giggle that was unmistakably Amber. Marcus turned his head, snapping toward the sound like a whip. Out walked Dante and Amber. They weren't just walking, they were entangled. Dante had his arm draped heavily over her shoulders, pulling her into his side. Amber was leaning into him, her head resting on his chest, her hand tucked into his back pocket. It was intimate, possessive, the body language of lovers who had forgotten the rest of the world existed. Marcus took a step forward, his face draining of color, then flooding with a violent red. His fists clenched at his sides so tight, his knuckles turned white. He looked like he was about to charge across the lobby like a bull, seeing red, ready to tear his brother apart limb by limb, ready to scream his wife's name, until the chandeliers shook. My phone buzzed in my hand. I sent the text I had drafted hours ago. "Don't do it! Marcus, look at your phone!" I watched him freeze. He pulled his phone out of his pocket, his eyes darting from the screen to the couple walking towards the exit, oblivious to his presence. "Don't blow this now," the text read. "If you confront them here, they will lie. They will gaslight you. They will say it was a business meeting. They will say, 'You are crazy. Wait for the party. Wait for the undeniable proof. If you attack him now, you lose everything, including Elijah.' Hold the line. Marcus, get your revenge." Cold. I saw the war waging inside him, the primal urge to destroy versus the calculated need for justice. He took a deep breath, his chest heaving. He watched them walk out the revolving doors. Dante stopping to kiss Amber's forehead before they got into the valet car. Marcus turned away, his shoulders shaking. He didn't scream. He didn't break anything. He just stood there vibrating with a silent, agonizing fury. He looked down at his phone again, reading my words, absorbing the strategy. He typed a response, and my phone buzzed. "I will wait," he wrote, "but when the time comes, I want the first swing." I watched him walk out the side exit, a broken man rebuilding himself into a weapon. He was ready. The final piece of the puzzle was in place. Dante and Amber thought they were getting away with murder, but they had just walked past their own executioner and didn't even know it. 2 days after Dante kicked me out of my own house, my phone rang. I was sitting in the presidential suite, wrapped in a robe, eating fresh fruit. Maya was watching cartoons. Oblivious to the war, waging outside the caller ID flashed. Mama Lucille. I almost laughed at the audacity. She had just helped her son evict me from my home, and now she was calling me, probably to gloat or to demand an apology for existing. I answered, my voice calm and detached. "Hello, Lucille Simone, where are you?" she barked. No greeting. No concern. Just demands. I stopped by the house to help Amber redecorate, and Dante said, "You were gone. Good riddance, but we have a problem." "A problem?" I asked, taking a bite of a strawberry. "The deposit for the St. Regis," she said, her voice rising in pitch. "The event coordinator just called me. She says the $15,000 payment is due by 5 p.m. today, or we lose the ballroom. Dante says his accounts are temporarily frozen because of some bank error, so you need to handle it." I stared at the phone, incredulous. "You want me to pay for your birthday party after your son kicked me out on the street?" Lucille scoffed. "Do not be dramatic, Simone. You have plenty of money, and you made a commitment to God and to this family. Besides, if you do not pay, I will make sure every single person in the church knows what kind of woman you really are. I will tell them you abandoned your mother-in-law on her milestone birthday because you are bitter and jealous. I will ruin your reputation, Simone. You will not be able to show your face in Atlanta." I listened to her threats, her voice grating like sandpaper. She thought she had leverage. She thought she could shame me into submission. She didn't realize that her party was the only thing I cared about right now. Not because I wanted to celebrate her, but because I needed a venue for her destruction. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to sound defeated. "Okay, Lucille, you win good," she said smugly. "Wire it now, and send me the confirmation number. Do not make me wait, Simone." I hung up and opened my banking app. $15,000. Was a lot of money. It was a down payment on a car. It was a year of rent for some people, but for me right now, it was the price of admission. It was the cost of renting a stage for the greatest show of my life. I entered the account details for the St. Regis, typed in the amount, and hit send. Transaction approved. I took a screenshot and texted it to Lucille. Paid. I wrote, "Enjoy your party." She didn't reply. She didn't say thank you. She just sent a thumbs up emoji. I looked at the screen and smiled. "You are welcome, Lucille," I whispered to the empty room. "I hope you enjoy the party because it is going to be a killer. Literally. I just bought the tickets to your funeral, and you don't even know it yet." Back in the master suite of the house I had legally sold 3 days ago, Amber was busy conducting her own personal fashion show. She had raided my walk-in closet, the one I had custom designed with cedar shelving and velvet-lined drawers, treating it like her own personal boutique. I watched the live feed from my hotel room, my stomach tightening as her hands pawed through my belongings. She tossed my silk blouses onto the floor. She tried on my blazers, stretching the shoulders, and she rummaged through my shoe collection, looking for anything that would fit her feet. Finally, her eyes landed on the garment bag, tucked away in the far corner. It was a bespoke Marquesa gown, midnight blue, encrusted with thousands of tiny hand-sewn crystals. I had bought it for a charity gala last year, a reward for a grueling tax season, but I never wore it because Dante told me it was too flashy, too attention-seeking. He said a wife should not outshine her husband, so it sat there pristine and perfect, waiting for a night worthy of its sparkle. Amber unzipped the bag, her eyes lighting up with greed. "Ooh, this is it," she squealed, holding the dress up against her body. "This is the one for the party. I'm going to look like royalty." I watched as she stripped down and stepped into the delicate silk creation. There was just one problem. I am a size 4, and Amber, on her best day, is a size 8. She shimmied the dress up her hips, huffing and puffing, the fabric straining dangerously against her skin. She sucked in her breath, her face turning red with exertion, trying to force her body into a silhouette that was never made for her. "Dante, get in here!" she screamed, her voice shrill. "Come zip me up!" Dante wandered into the closet, a beer in his hand, looking bored. He set his drink down on my jewelry island, leaving a wet ring on the velvet, and walked behind her. "It is too tight." "Amber," he grunted, struggling with the zipper. "Just do it!" she snapped, arching her back. "Suck it in." He grabbed the delicate zipper tab and yanked with all his strength. I flinched, watching the screen, knowing what was coming next. There was a sickening sound, a loud tearing noise that ripped through the audio feed like a scream, followed by the distinctive ping 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 of crystal beads hitting the hardwood floor. The zipper had blown out completely, shredding the silk all the way down the back, destroying the structural integrity of the bodice. The dress slid off her shoulders, hanging in tatters around her waist, a $5,000 work of art ruined in seconds by vanity and force. Dante cursed, stepping back. "Damn it, Amber, you ripped it. That looked expensive." Amber looked at the ruin of the dress, at the beads scattered across the floor, and she just laughed. She stepped out of the pile of shredded silk and kicked it into the corner like it was a dirty towel. "Who cares?" she said dismissively. "It was probably a knockoff. Anyway, you know Simone, she has cheap taste. Besides, it is all trash now. Everything in this house is ours to do what we want with. Throwing it away just saves me the trouble of burning it later. I will just buy something better tomorrow." She continued, walking over to the mirror to admire herself in her underwear. "Use the card Mama gave you. I want something gold." I watched them leave the closet, leaving the carcass of my dress on the floor. I saved the video clip, adding it to the folder labeled "Property Damage," and smiled. Let her call it trash. Let her destroy the fabric. She did not realize that by destroying that dress she had just given me the perfect visual metaphor for my presentation, the destruction of beauty by the hands of greed. It was not a loss. It was a prop, and it was going to look fantastic on the big screen. While Mama Lucille was busy choosing tablecloths, and Amber was destroying my wardrobe, I was sitting in the business center of the Ritz-Carlton, designing the most dangerous piece of stationery in Atlanta. I opened my graphic design software and pulled up a template for a royal gala invitation. Black velvet background, gold foil lettering, heavy serif font that screamed old money and prestige. I typed the header carefully. "The Jenkins family cordially invites you to the 65th Jubilee of Lucille Jenkins." Below that I added the hook, the line that would ensure a packed house, followed by an exclusive announcement regarding the future of the Jenkins legacy and the unveiling of the true heir. I hit save and sent the file to a luxury printing house in Buckhead, the kind that uses actual gold dust in their ink. I ordered 200 copies, rush delivery, but I didn't stop there. I pulled up my contact list, a database I had built over 10 years of networking in this city. I selected the names carefully, not just the church ladies, not just the neighbors. I selected the power players, the people whose opinion could make or break a career in this town. Pastor Jenkins, the head of the church council, a man who preached fidelity and righteousness every Sunday. Judge Montgomery, the presiding judge of the Fulton County Superior Court, who happened to be a deacon at our church. Mr. Sterling, the managing partner of the biggest real estate firm in the city, the man Dante desperately wanted to impress. And most importantly, the gossip columnists, 3 of them, bloggers who fed on the scandals of Atlanta's elite like sharks in chummed water. I addressed the envelopes by hand, using calligraphy that would make a nun weep. I slipped the heavy cards inside, sealed them with gold wax, and had them couriered out that afternoon. By evening, the phone started ringing. Mama Lucille called me, her voice breathless with excitement. "Simone, honey," she gasped. "Have you seen the RSVPs? Judge Montgomery just called me personally to accept. He said he wouldn't miss the announcement for the world." "What did you write on those invitations?" I smiled into the phone. "Just the truth, Mama," I said, my voice sweet as molasses. "I told them we were making a legacy announcement. I thought it would be a nice surprise for you to have everyone there when we reveal everything." "Oh, Simone, you outdid yourself," she cooed, actually praising me for the first time in 7 years. "I knew you had it in you. This is going to be magnificent. Everyone thinks Dante is finally taking over the family business properly, or maybe that we are announcing a new acquisition." "Oh, it is an acquisition, all right. I thought acquiring justice." "I am glad you are happy, Mama," I said. "I just make sure the right people are in the room when the news breaks." "Yes, yes," she agreed, practically giddy. "Make sure the photographer is ready. I want pictures of me with the judge and the pastor. This is going to secure our standing in the community for generations." I hung up and looked at the RSVP list, filling up on my screen. Accept, accept, accept. They were all coming like moths to a flame, drawn by the promise of spectacle and status. They thought they were coming to a coronation. They didn't know they were RSVPing to a public execution, and I was the one sharpening the axe. 2 days before the Grand Jubilee, Dante decided his Range Rover wasn't shiny enough for the event. He drove it to the upscale car wash on Piedmont Road, the one where local celebrities and athletes go to get their cars detailed while they sip espresso in the lounge. It was a place to see and be seen, and Dante loved it. He pulled into the bay, tossing the keys to the attendant like he was handing out favors. "Make it sparkle, Chief," he said, loud enough for the Falcons player sitting nearby to hear. "I have a big night coming up." He strutted into the lounge, ordering a double espresso and pulling out his phone, probably to check if his imaginary millions had hit his account yet. He sat there for 20 minutes, scrolling and preening, until a commotion outside drew everyone's attention. A massive flatbed tow truck had pulled up, blocking the exit lane. The driver, a burly man in a neon vest, walked straight past the confused attendants and slapped a bright orange sticker on the windshield of the Range Rover. Dante jumped up his espresso, sloshing onto his hand. "Hey, what are you doing? Get away from my car." The tow truck driver didn't even look at him. He just signaled to his partner, who was already hooking the chains to the undercarriage. "Repo order, buddy," he said, checking a clipboard. "Vehicle is 3 months behind on payments. Lien holder wants it back today." Dante's face turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. "Repo? Are you crazy? I am Dante Jenkins. Do you know who I am? This is a mistake. Call the bank right now." "I don't call banks," the driver said, unimpressed. "I just tow cars. You want to argue? Call your wife. Her name is on the lease." The lounge went silent. Every head turned. The football player lowered his magazine, smirking. Dante stood there powerless as his status symbol was hoisted into the air. Tires spinning helplessly, the truck's engine roared to life, dragging the matte black SUV away, leaving Dante standing in a puddle of soapy water, holding a lukewarm coffee. My phone rang almost instantly, Dante screaming. "Simone!" He roared so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. "What the hell is going on? They just took the Rover. They said you stopped paying the lease." "Oh, did I?" I said, my voice light and airy. "Sorry, Dante. I must have forgotten. Things have been so hectic lately with the move and everything. You know how it is, you forgot," he screamed. "Forgetting is leaving the lights on." "Simone, this is grand theft. Auto fix it, call them back, pay whatever they want. I cannot right now." "Honey," I said, typing away on my laptop, finalizing the PowerPoint for the party. "I am actually really busy working, trying to scrape together some cash to pay off your credit card debt. You know, the one you racked up buying handbags for your sister-in-law. Money is tight, babe. You understand." "You useless," he started, but I cut him off. "Take an Uber." Dante, I said cheerfully. Or maybe call Mom. She seems to have plenty of money these days. I hung up and blocked his number for the next hour. Let him walk. Let him feel the pavement under his feet. Let him realize that without me, he was just a pedestrian in a world of drivers. The grapevine. In Atlanta moves faster than fiber optic internet, especially when it involves a tow truck and a Jenkins. By the time the sun set on the day of the repossession, half the church choir knew. Dante had been left standing on the curb. Rumors were swirling like vultures circling a carcass. Some said Dante was broke, others whispered about gambling debts. But the most damaging rumor was the truth, that the Jenkins empire was a house of cards held together by his wife's credit score. Mama Lucille felt the tremors. She knew that her grand jubilee was in danger of becoming a grand roast if she didn't get control of the narrative fast. My phone rang at 8 p.m., just as I was finishing a room service dinner with Maya. I looked at the screen, expecting another demand for money. Instead, the voice on the other end was trembling, not with rage, but with a terrifyingly fake sweetness that was far more dangerous. "Simone, baby, are you there?" Mama Lucille asked. Her voice dipped in honey and anxiety. "I am here, Mama," said, putting the call on speaker so I could continue typing my final speech. "Listen, honey, I heard about the mix-up with the car today," she said, breezing past the humiliation like it was a minor typo. "Terrible bank error. Dante is so stressed, but we cannot let this distract us from the big picture. The Jubilee is in 2 days, and I need to make sure everything is perfect." She paused, waiting for me to reassure her when I didn't. She continued, her desperation leaking through. "I need to know you are coming. Simone, specifically, I need you standing right next to Dante when we cut the cake. I want a family photo. Front and center, you, Dante. Me and Amber with little Elijah. We need to show these people that the Jenkins family is solid. That we are united. There is too much chatter. Simone, too many jealous tongues wagging about our business. If you are there looking beautiful and expensive like you always do, it will shut them all up." I almost felt sorry for her. She was trying to use me as a human shield. She wanted to hide her son's failures behind my success. She wanted my presence to validate his existence, to say, "Look, he still has the smart, rich wife, so he must be doing okay." She wanted me to be the paint that covered the rot in the walls. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes. She had no idea that I wasn't coming to patch the cracks. I was coming to swing the sledgehammer. "Of course I will be there, Mama," I said, my voice steady and reassuring. "I wouldn't miss it for the world. I already have my dress picked out, and Dante and I will be right there by your side when the cameras flash." "Oh, thank you, Jesus," she sighed, the relief palpable on the line. "I knew I could count on you, Simone. You are a good girl. Wear something red, honey. It signifies power. We need to look powerful." I smiled, looking at the blood-red dress hanging in the closet, waiting for its moment. "Red." "It is, Mama," I said. "Power is exactly what I intend to show." She hung up, thinking she had secured her legacy. She thought she had manipulated me back into line one last time. She didn't realize that by inviting me to stand center stage, she had just handed me the microphone for her own eulogy. She wanted a family photo. I was going to give her a crime scene photo. The afternoon sun sliced through the blinds of Marcus Sterling's conference room, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air like tiny sparks before a fire. I sat at the head of the mahogany table, my hands folded on top of a leather portfolio. Usually this room was reserved for mergers and acquisitions, for billionaires signing away companies. Today, it was the staging ground for a family's annihilation. Marcus stood by the wall monitor, a remote in his hand, his face a mask of professional appreciation. He clicked the button, and the 60-inch screen flared to life. Slide 1 appeared. It was the video from the bathroom stall. I had enhanced the audio, removed the background noise of flushing toilets and running water, so Mama Lucille's voice rang out with crystal clarity, confessing to the theft, mocking my daughter. Marcus clicked again. Slide 2. The photos of Dante and Amber entering the condo zoomed in 400% to show the intimacy of their touch. the timestamp glowing in neon red slide 3. The DNA results, the probability of paternity highlighted in yellow, a damning 99.9% staring back at us like an accusation. It is perfect, Marcus said, his voice low. This is not just a presentation. Simone, this is a forensic autopsy of their lives performed while they are still breathing. I nodded, looking at the screen, but digital proof was not enough. I wanted them to hold their destruction in their hands. I wanted them to feel the weight of their consequences. I looked down at the table, where 3 large boxes sat, wrapped in shimmering gold paper and tied with scarlet silk ribbons. They looked like expensive gifts, the kind you give to honor a matriarch or a beloved husband. But inside, they held something far more valuable than gold. Opened, the first box, nestled in black velvet, was a document framed in heavy mahogany. It was the deed to the house, stamped in red ink with the word, "Sold." The transfer date and time were clearly visible. 8 p.m. tonight. 8:01 p.m. eviction. I opened the second box. Inside was a thick sheaf of papers bound with a silver clip. The divorce petition citing adultery, financial fraud and grand larceny. Attached to it was a restraining order, granting me full custody of Maya and barring Dante from coming within 500 feet of us, pending a criminal trial. The third box was the heaviest. Inside was a copy of the dossier I had sent to the IRS, along with a draft of the indictment that my contact at the district attorney's office had assured me was being filed as we spoke: wire fraud, tax evasion, conspiracy to commit money laundering. It was a roadmap to federal prison framed in gold leaf. Marcus picked up the eviction notice, admiring the craftsmanship of the frame. "You have a flair for the dramatic, Simone," he said, smiling. "I have never seen anyone gift wrap a foreclosure before. They wanted a show, Marcus," I said. Running my finger over the silk ribbon, Mama Lucille wanted to show off her wealth, her power, her legacy. Well, here it is. This is her legacy. A sold house, a criminal record, and a bankrupt son. I am just giving the people what they want. I closed the boxes, tying the ribbons with precise, steady hands. I checked my watch. It was 4 p.m. The party started at 6. I had 2 hours to transform from the auditor into the executioner. I stood up, gathering the boxes. "Thank you, Marcus," I said. "You have been invaluable." He walked me to the door. "Do you want security to go with you?" I shook my head. "No, I want to walk in alone. I want them to see me and think I am finally broken. I want them to think I am coming to surrender. So they lower their guards." I walked out of the office carrying the gold boxes. The weight of them felt good, grounding me. I took the elevator down to the lobby, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the marble floor outside. The heat of the Atlanta afternoon hit me, but I felt cold, ice, cold. Dante was probably tying his bow tie right now, admiring himself in the mirror, thinking about the lie he was going to tell the guests. Mama Lucille was probably yelling at the florists, making sure her throne was positioned just right. They were preparing for a coronation. I was preparing for a revolution. And as I got into my car, placing the gifts carefully on the passenger seat, I knew one thing for certain. When I walked out of that ballroom tonight, I would be the only one leaving with my head held high. The late afternoon sun bathed the hotel suite in a warm golden light. But I was in no mood for warmth. I was channeling ice and fire. Mostly fire. I stood before the floor-to-ceiling mirror, smoothing the fabric of the dress over my hips. It was a custom creation, a deep blood-red silk that shimmered with every movement. Dante had always hated me in red. He said it was too aggressive, too loud. He preferred me in pastels and neutrals, colors that allowed me to fade into the wallpaper while he shined. Not tonight. Tonight, I was the only thing anyone would look at. This dress was not just clothing, it was a declaration of war. It was the color of the lipstick I applied with steady precision, outlining my lips in crimson armor. Maya was sitting on the edge of the massive bed, swinging her legs, her eyes wide as she watched my transformation. She was wearing her favorite velvet dress, holding her teddy bear tightly. "You look like a princess, Mommy," she whispered, her voice full of awe, like the ones in the storybooks waiting for the prince to save them. I capped my lipstick with a sharp click and turned to face her, the silk of my dress rustling like dry leaves. I walked over and knelt in front of her, so we were eye to eye. I took her small hands in mine, her skin warm and soft against my cool palms. "Listen to me, Maya," I said, my voice low and serious. "I need you to understand something very important tonight. You are going to see some things that might be loud and maybe a little scary. You are going to see that the bad guys in your storybooks are real. They do not always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like family." Her eyes widened slightly, fear flickering in their depths. "Are they going to hurt us?" "No," I said firmly, squeezing her hands. "Never again. Because here is the secret, baby. We are not princesses. We are not waiting in a tower for a prince to come and save us. Princesses are victims waiting to be rescued." "Then what are we?" she asked, tilting her head. I smiled, a slow, fierce smile that felt sharp on my face. "We are the dragons, Maya," I said. "We are the ones who breathe fire and burn the castle down when the bad guys try to lock us up tonight. Mommy is going to roar." She giggled, the sound breaking the tension. "Dragons are cool." "Yes, they are." I stood up, smoothing my skirt. "Dragons are very cool and they always win." I walked to the table where the 3 gold boxes sat waiting. They looked innocent enough, wrapped in their expensive paper and silk ribbons, but I knew they contained the end of the Jenkins dynasty. I picked them up, their weight reassuring in my arms. "Let's go, little dragon," I said, nodding towards the door. "It is time to feed." Maya hopped off the bed, grabbing her bear. We walked out of the suite, leaving the silence behind us. The elevator ride down felt like a descent into the arena. But I was not the gladiator entering the ring to die. I was the lion released from the cage, and I was starving for justice. As the doors opened to the lobby, I held my head high, the red dress flowing around me like liquid courage. I was ready to face them, ready to end them, ready to show Mama Lucille exactly what happens when you try to bury a woman who was made of fire. The St. Regis ballroom was a cavern of gold leaf and crystal, illuminated by chandeliers that cost more than most people's homes. The light fractured through the teardrop prisms, casting a kaleidoscope of rainbows across the crowd of 200 Atlanta elites. Mama Lucille had gotten her wish. The room smelled of expensive lilies imported from Holland, and the crisp, metallic scent of ozone and money. The tables were set with heavy silver chargers and napkins folded into swans, a display of old-school opulence that screamed, "We have arrived." At the center of it all sat Mama Lucille on a high-backed velvet chair that looked suspiciously like a throne. She was wearing a gold sequined gown that shimmered violently under the lights, making her look like a disco ball that had gained sentience. But it wasn't the dress that made my blood run cold. It was the jewelry around her neck, glinting against her skin, was my vintage Bulgari serpent necklace, the one my grandmother left me. On her wrist was my diamond tennis bracelet, the one I bought after my first big promotion. She hadn't just raided the wine cellar. She had cracked the safe. She was wearing my heritage like costume jewelry, parading my hard-earned success as her own family heirlooms. Standing to her left was Amber, looking like a child playing dress-up in her mother's closet. She had replaced the ruined Marquesa gown with something neon pink and strapless, a garment that showed too much skin for a church function. She was holding a champagne flute with a pinky extended, trying desperately to look like she belonged, but her eyes darted around the room nervously, scanning the crowd as if she expected someone to call security. She was laughing too loud, touching her hair too often, a nervous tic that betrayed her imposter syndrome. And then there was Dante, my husband, the architect of his own demise. He was working the room like a politician on the campaign trail. His chest puffed out inside his tuxedo, his smile blindingly white and entirely fake. I watched him clap, Judge Montgomery on the shoulder, laughing at a joke he didn't understand. I heard snippets of his conversation as he moved through the crowd. "Oh yes, business is booming. Just closed a massive development deal in Buckhead. This is just a small celebration. You know how we do." The guests were eating the food, the lobster bisque and the filet mignon, but they were also eating up the gossip. I could hear the whispers rippling through the room like a current underneath the jazz band's smooth melody. "Did you see the size of that diamond on Lucille's finger? Surely Dante isn't doing that well. I heard rumors about a cash flow problem just last week. Well, look around. This party must have cost $50,000 at least." They were suspicious, yes, but they were also mesmerized by the spectacle. That is the thing about Atlanta society. They love a train wreck, but they love a party even more. They were drinking the champagne, unaware that it was poisoned with deceit. They were smiling at the hosts, unaware that the bill was coming due. And I stood in the shadows at the back of the room holding my red clutch tight, watching the golden family shimmer in their stolen light, waiting for the moment to flip the switch and plunge them into darkness. The heavy double doors of the ballroom swung open with a theatrical thud that cut through the low hum of jazz music and polite conversation like a guillotine blade dropping. I stood in the archway framed by the light from the corridor, a vision in blood-red silk that pooled around my feet like liquid fire. For 7 years, I had walked into rooms with my head down, shoulders hunched, trying to make myself smaller, trying to shrink so I would not bruise Dante's fragile ego. But tonight, I walked in with my spine made of steel and my head held high, wearing the color of war. Behind me walked Marcus. But this was not the gentle peacekeeper the family was used to seeing. His face was a mask of cold fury. His eyes fixed on his brother with a hatred so intense it felt like it could melt the silverware together. We moved into the room and the effect was instantaneous. The crowd parted before us, like the Red Sea, the guests stepping back with wide eyes and then hushed gasps. They were expecting the mousy accountant, the woman who blended into the beige walls. Instead, they got a dragon and her enforcer. I heard the whispers rippling through the crowd. "Is that Simone? She looks incredible. Look at that dress." But I ignored them. My eyes were locked on the stage where the impostors stood frozen. Mama Lucille spotted me from her throne and scrambled up her face, turning a mottled shade of purple that clashed horribly with her gold sequins. She marched towards me as fast as her heels would allow, her stolen jewelry clanking aggressively against her collarbone. She intercepted me near the center of the dance floor, blocking my path with her body, her eyes bulging with indignation. "Simone?" She hissed, her voice a venomous whisper, meant only for me, but loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "What in God's name do you think you are doing, showing up here looking like that? How dare you wear that dress and try to upstage the birthday girl in her own ballroom? You look like a harlot." She grabbed my arm, her fake nails digging into my skin, trying to physically steer me away. "Go to the kitchen immediately," she ordered, spitting the words out. "Check on the catering. The crab cakes are running low and the servers are being slow. Stay back there out of sight until I tell you to come out. You are embarrassing me and ruining the aesthetic of my party." I looked down at her hand on my arm, then up at her face caked in makeup and delusion. In the past I would have apologized. I would have scurried away to the service entrance to check the crab cakes and cry in the pantry. But the old Simone was dead and buried along with her patience. I threw my head back and laughed, a loud, clear sound that echoed off the vaulted ceiling, silencing the few people who were still talking. It was not a nervous laugh. It was the laugh of a woman who knows the punchline to a joke no one else has heard yet. It was the sound of absolute freedom. I pulled my arm from her grip with a sharp jerk, causing her to stumble back in her heels, almost losing her balance. "No, Lucille," I said, my voice projecting without effort. "I do not think I will be checking on the crab cakes tonight. I think I will check on the truth." Instead, I stepped around her, leaving her sputtering and shocked in my wake. I walked straight to the stage, the spotlight catching the crystals on my dress, turning me into a beacon. The bandleader looked at me terrified as I reached out and took the microphone from his hand. Cutting off the music completely, I tapped the microphone twice, the sound booming through the speakers, demanding absolute silence. I looked out at the sea of faces, at Dante, who had frozen with a glass of champagne, halfway to his mouth, at Amber, who looked ready to bolt, and finally at Lucille, who was staring at me in horror, knowing she had lost control. "Welcome, everyone," I said, my voice smooth and dangerous. "Thank you all for coming to witness history tonight. Good evening, everyone, and happy birthday, Mama." "Lucille," I said, my voice echoing through the silent ballroom. I stood center stage, the spotlight burning against my skin like a second sun. I looked down at the woman who had made my life a misery for 7 years. She was standing near the buffet table, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Unable to comprehend that I had hijacked her moment of glory. "I know we are all here to celebrate the Jenkins legacy." I continued, smiling, that dangerous smile again. "And what is a legacy without a little history lesson? Mama Lucille always says that family is everything, and that honesty is the foundation of a godly home. So in honor of that spirit, I have prepared a short film, a little documentary, if you will, about the true heart of this family." I gestured to the audio technician, a young man I had tipped $200 earlier to follow my instructions. "No matter what, hit it," I commanded. The massive projection screen behind me, which was supposed to display a slideshow of Lucille's childhood photos, flickered to life, but instead of a sepia-toned baby picture, a grainy, high-definition video appeared. It was shot from a low angle, clearly taken from under a bathroom stall door. The room gasped collectively as the image sharpened. 2 pairs of feet were visible on the tiled floor. One pair wore scuffed orthopedic heels that every person in the room recognized as belonging to Lucille. The other pair wore sky-high, cheap red stilettos, the signature look of Amber. Then the audio kicked in, and I had made sure the volume was turned up to the maximum level. The sound of flushing toilets faded out, replaced by voices that were so loud and clear they seemed to be coming from the ceiling of the ballroom itself. "God, I cannot stand her." Amber's voice boomed through the speakers, dripping with malice. "She acts so high and mighty with her little blazer and her corporate job. When are we going to get rid of her, Dante, patience, child?" Lucille's voice answered, unmistakable in its arrogance. "We need her to pay for the jubilee first. That party is going to cost $30,000. And you know, Dante does not have 2 nickels to rub together. We let her pay for the party. We let her sign the renovation loan for the lake house, and then once the money is secure, we kick her to the curb." The video continued, the conversation growing even more vile. "But what if she fights back?" Amber whined. "She won't fight back," Lucille scoffed on the recording. "She is weak. She is desperate for my approval. She thinks if she buys me enough gifts, I will finally love her. It is pathetic, really. We will strip her dry, take the house, and then tell the church she cheated on Dante. Nobody will believe the outsider over the deacon's mother." I stood on stage, watching the audience. The silence that fell over the room was heavy and suffocating. It was the sound of 200 people realizing they were witnessing a moral murder. I looked at Pastor Jenkins sitting at table 1. His fork had fallen from his hand, clattering onto his china plate. His mouth was hanging open, his eyes wide with shock. He looked from the screen to Lucille, his face a mask of absolute horror. This was the woman who sat in his front pew every Sunday, the woman who claimed to be a pillar of virtue, caught on tape, plotting the financial ruin of her own daughter-in-law. Lucille stood frozen by the crab cakes, her face draining of all color, turning a sickly shade of gray beneath her makeup. She looked at the screen, then at me. Her eyes filled with a terror I had never seen before. She knew there was no spinning this. There was no lie big enough to cover the truth of her own voice echoing off the walls. I let the video play to the end, to the part where they laughed together, a cruel, cackling sound that sealed their fate. Then I signaled for the screen to go black. I raised the microphone to my lips again, breaking the deafening silence. "I hope you enjoyed the opening act," I said, my voice cool and steady, "but do not worry, the show is just getting started, because that was just the trailer. Wait until you see the feature presentation. The whispers were just starting to rise from the tables like steam. But I was not done serving the main course. I looked at the technician and nodded once, just a subtle tilt of my head, and the screen behind me shifted again. The grainy footage of the bathroom disappeared, replaced by crystal-clear, high-resolution photographs taken by a private investigator who knew exactly where to look. There they were, projected 10 feet high for all of Atlanta to see. Dante and Amber walking into the Ritz-Carlton, not as brother and sister-in-law, but as lovers. His hand was on the small of her back, her head resting on his shoulder. Intimate, undeniable. The date stamp in the corner proved this was taken just last week while I was allegedly grieving our separation. But the photos were just the setup. The punchline came next. A document scanned and enlarged so every person in the back row could read the fine print. Appeared on the screen. It was a standard paternity test from a reputable lab, the header clearly stating the names of the subjects. Dante Jenkins and Elijah Jenkins. The little boy sitting in the nursery right now, believing Marcus was his father. The numbers were highlighted in neon yellow. Probability of paternity, 99.9%. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room louder than before, a sound of pure scandal. But I wasn't looking at the crowd, I was looking at Marcus. He had been standing near the entrance, waiting for this moment, vibrating with the energy of a man whose world had just ended. He didn't run. He walked his steps heavy and deliberate, marching toward the stage like a soldier walking into cannon fire. He climbed the stairs, his eyes locked on his brother. Dante stood there frozen, the champagne glass finally slipping from his fingers and shattering on the floor. A prelude to the violence to come. Marcus grabbed the microphone from my hand, his grip tight, his knuckles white. He turned to Dante, his voice cracking with a pain so raw it made people look away. "You slept with my wife," he screamed, the sound tearing through the speakers, distorting with the force of his rage. "You slept with Amber in my house, in my bed, while I was raising your son, thinking he was mine." Then he turned to Lucille, who was shaking near the cake table, looking for an exit that didn't exist. "And you knew," he roared, pointing a trembling finger at his mother. "You knew the whole time. And you let me live a lie. You let me raise my brother's bastard because you wanted to protect your golden child. You sacrificed me for him." Dante tried to step forward, his hands raised in a pathetic attempt to calm the storm. "Calm down. Marcus, look. Let's talk about this outside. Don't make a scene," but there was no talking left to be done. Marcus pulled back his fist and unleashed years of betrayal in a single motion. He connected squarely with Dante's jaw, a sickening crack that echoed through the microphone still clutched in his other hand. Dante crumbled, dropping like a stone, his legs giving out under the weight of the truth. Amber let out a scream, a high-pitched shriek that shattered the last remnants of decorum. She covered her mouth, staring at the man she had cuckolded, staring at the ruin of her secret life as the room descended into absolute chaos. I stepped back into the shadows, the director watching the tragic finale of the play I had orchestrated. The room was vibrating with the chaotic energy of a riot. But I was not finished dismantling their lives layer by layer. I stepped over Dante, who was groaning on the floor, clutching his jaw, and tapped the microphone one last time, the sharp sound cutting through the noise of Marcus's heavy breathing and the shocked murmurs of the crowd. "Please hold your applause," I said, my voice cutting through the din like a knife. "I have one final announcement regarding the living arrangements of our happy couple." I pointed the remote at the screen, and the paternity test vanished, replaced by a legal document that was far more devastating to the people in this room. It was a property deed, stamped with the official seal of Fulton County and a bright red banner across the top that read, "Sold." "You see, Dante and Amber have been getting quite comfortable in the house on Oakwood Drive." I continued, my tone, conversational, almost helpful. "They have been redecorating, throwing parties and drinking my wine, acting like they own the place. But there is a tiny detail they overlooked: that house was purchased with my inheritance before the marriage, and it is titled solely in my name. I paused, letting that sink in, watching Dante's eyes widen as he looked up from the floor, spitting blood. And since I am a generous soul, I decided to liquidate that asset. I sold the house last week to a commercial developer who plans to bulldoze it to the ground to build luxury condos. Amber stopped crying and looked up, her mascara running down her face in black rivulets. Wait, what do you mean you sold it? We live there. Not anymore, I said, checking my watch with exaggerated slowness. You see, the contract had a very specific clause called vacant possession, meant to take effect today, at 8 p.m. sharp. It is now 8:45 p.m. That means legally anything left inside that house after the deadline is considered abandoned property trash. To be precise, I looked directly at Amber, smiling a cold, predatory smile. So right now, as we speak, the new owners are at the house with a team of movers and a police escort. They are clearing out every single room into a dumpster, specifically the master bedroom closet. I believe that is where you keep all your designer handbags and that new wardrobe you bought with my credit card. Isn't it? Amber let out a sound that was not human. It was the wail of a wounded animal. She didn't care about the affair. She didn't care about the brother she destroyed. She cared about her things. She cared about the fake status she had built with leather and silk. My bags, she screamed, scrambling to her feet, her heels slipping on the polished floor. My jewelry is in there. My furs. You cannot do this. It is illegal. It is perfectly legal, I assured her, looking out at the stunned audience. The deed is done. Literally. The house is empty. Amber, stripped to the studs. Your things are currently on their way to the city dump where they belong. She collapsed back onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, pounding her fists against the wood, crying out the names of fashion designers like they were lost children. The audience watched in horrified fascination, seeing the shallow depth of her soul exposed. She wasn't mourning a home, she was mourning her inventory. I looked down at the pathetic tableau, the beaten husband, the sobbing mistress, and the matriarch who was shaking in her sequins, and I felt absolutely nothing but the cool satisfaction of a job well done. They wanted to take everything from me, so I ensured they would leave with nothing but the clothes on their backs, and even those were probably going out of style. Just as the echoes of Amber's screaming about her handbags began to fade into the shocked silence of the ballroom, the heavy double doors flew open once again, but this time, it was not a grand entrance for a family member, and it was certainly not the dessert course. Marching in with grim determination were 6 officers in uniform, flanked by 4 men in the sharp navy windbreakers that strike fear into the hearts of every American citizen. The letters IRS printed in bold yellow across their backs. The music had stopped long ago, but now even the breathing in the room seemed to cease. The atmosphere shifted instantly from social scandal to criminal reality. The officers did not look around at the flowers or the crystal chandeliers. They moved with the terrifying efficiency of predators who had located their prey. They walked straight past Mama Lucille, who was clutching her chest, feigning a heart attack, and surrounded Dante and Amber, where they huddled on the floor. Dante Jenkins, a deep voice boomed from the lead agent. A man who looked like he had never smiled in his life. Stand up. You are under arrest. Dante scrambled to his feet, his tuxedo disheveled, blood still staining his chin. Wait. Hold on. There must be a mistake. I am a businessman. This is my mother's birthday party. There is no mistake, the agent said, pulling a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. We have a warrant for your arrest on multiple counts of federal income tax evasion, wire fraud, and the embezzlement of funds from a protected minors trust fund, specifically the college savings account of your stepdaughter, Maya. The crowd let out a sound that was less of a gasp and more of a growl. Stealing from a wife was one thing, but stealing from a child was a sin that even this room of sinners could not forgive. Amber tried to edge away, inching backward in her neon pink dress, hoping to blend into the scenery. But two officers intercepted her. Immediately, Amber Jenkins or Amber Davis. The officer corrected, reading from a sheet. You are also under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, receiving stolen property, and money laundering regarding the assets of L&A Holdings. Me? She shrieked as they grabbed her arms, twisting them behind her back. I didn't do anything. I just spent the money he gave me. I didn't know where it came from. Get your hands off me. This dress is silk. Ignorance is not a defense, ma'am, the officer said, snapping the cuffs shut with a metallic click that rang out like a judgment bell. You are an accessory to the crime. Dante watched as his mistress was dragged away, kicking and screaming, and then he looked at the agents closing in on him. The reality finally pierced his delusion. His mother couldn't save him. His lies couldn't save him. He looked wildly around the room until his eyes landed on me, standing calm and untouched in my red dress. He lunged toward me, dragging the agents a few steps with him, desperation pouring off him like sweat. Simone, baby, please, he wailed, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the blood. You have to stop them. Tell them it is a misunderstanding. Tell them I was going to pay it back. I am your husband, Simone. I am the man you love. Do not let them take me. I looked at him. This man who had called me old and frumpy, who had spent my money on another woman, who had tried to leave my daughter with nothing. He looked pathetic, a child caught with his hand in the jar begging for mercy he did not deserve. I reached out to a passing waiter who was frozen in place, holding a tray of drinks, and coolly lifted a flute of champagne. I brought the crystal glass to my lips, my eyes never leaving Dante's face. I took a slow, deliberate sip, savoring the bubbles, savoring the sweetness of the moment. I lowered the glass and smiled, a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I am sorry, I said, my voice flat and unbothered. I do not know who you are. My husband died a long time ago. You are just a stranger. With a rap sheet, I turned my back on him as the agents dragged him away. His screams of my name fading as the doors closed behind them, sealing his fate and opening my future. The sirens outside faded into the humid Atlanta night, but the silence they left behind in the ballroom was heavier than any noise could ever be. The police had taken the criminals, but they had left the architect of the chaos behind. Mama Lucille stood alone in the center of the dance floor, the spotlight still hitting her gold-sequined dress, which now looked less like a royal garment and more like a cheap costume from a failed play. She looked around the room, searching for an ally, for a sympathetic face, but all she found were the backs of the people she had spent her life trying to impress. The guests were not eating, they were not whispering, they were staring at her with a mixture of pity and revulsion. Then came the final gavel strike of her social execution. Pastor Jenkins stood up from table 1. He did not rush, he moved with the slow, deliberate weight of righteous judgment. He wiped his mouth with a linen napkin, placed it gently on the table, and walked toward her, the sound of his footsteps echoing in the quiet room. Lucille Jenkins, his voice boomed, not shouting, but carrying the authority of God himself. Look at me. Lucille turned toward him, her hands trembling, clutching the stolen diamond necklace at her throat. Pastor, please, she whimpered. It is a misunderstanding. Dante is a good boy. He just got mixed up. Enough. The pastor raised a hand, cutting her off. Silence. Woman, we have seen the evidence with our own eyes, and we have heard the venom from your own lips. You plotted to destroy a faithful wife, you condoned adultery, and you mocked the sanctity of marriage in the eyes of the Lord. He took a breath, looking around at his congregation before delivering the verdict. Effective immediately, you are removed from the board of deacons. You are stripped of your title as head of the choir, and you are no longer welcome to lead any committee in this church. This level of moral depravity cannot be tolerated in the house of God. You have brought shame upon this community. Lucille, and we will not harbor a serpent in our bosom. You are expelled from leadership. The words hit her physically. She flinched as if he had slapped her. This was worse than prison for Lucille. This was social death. She was being cast out of the kingdom she thought she ruled. She looked at the judges, the doctors, the socialites, and saw them turning away, gathering their purses, signaling for their valets, distancing themselves from the stench of her failure. Panic set in, real, raw panic. She realized in that moment that she had nothing. Dante was gone, the money was gone, the house was sold, and her reputation was in ashes. She scanned the room frantically until her eyes locked on me, the only person left who had any power. "Simone?" she gasped, stumbling toward me, her arms outstretched, ignoring the fact that she had tried to have me thrown out. "Minutes ago, Simone, daughter. Please, you cannot leave me like this." She grabbed my hands, her grip weak and clammy, tears cutting tracks through her heavy makeup. "I am an old woman, Simone," she sobbed. "I have nowhere to go. The house is gone. Dante is in jail. You cannot let your mother in. Law live on the street. It is not Christian. Think of Maya. She needs her grandmother." I looked down at this woman who had called me a harlot, who had laughed about stealing my money, who had treated me like an ATM machine for 7 years. I felt no anger anymore, only a cold, distant pity. I leaned in close so only she could hear me, intimate as a secret. "Do not worry, Lucille," I whispered, my voice soft against her ear. "I checked your financials too. You have that small state pension, and your social security checks. Do not forget about those." She looked at me confused, hope flickering in her eyes. "It is not much." I continued smiling sweetly, "but if you budget carefully, it is enough to rent a small room in a boarding house. Maybe a studio apartment on the south side. It won't be the St. Regis, but it is a roof over your head." Her face crumbled, the hope dying instantly. "But I cannot live like that," she whispered, horrified. "I am Lucille Jenkins." "Not anymore," I said, pulling my hands away from her grip. "Now you are just another broke old woman facing the consequences of her actions." "Good luck, Lucille," I said, stepping back, turning my back on her for the last time. I walked toward the exit, my red dress trailing behind me, leaving her standing alone in the center of the ballroom, a queen without a castle, a mother without a son, and a woman without a name. The heavy oak doors of courtroom 4B closed with a dull thud, sealing the fate of the Jenkins dynasty inside walls of mahogany, and in difference 3 months had passed since the night of the red dress and the Jubilee explosion. 3 months of depositions, forensic audits, and meetings with federal prosecutors. Today was the final act, the day the gavel would fall and the credits would roll on my marriage. I sat in the front row wearing a crisp white suit, a deliberate choice symbolizing a clean slate, a new beginning. I sat alone, but I did not feel lonely. I felt the solid weight of justice sitting beside me. Dante sat at the defense table, but the arrogant mogul in the tuxedo was gone, replaced by a man in a bright orange jumpsuit who looked 10 years older. His shoulders were slumped, his hair was unkempt, and he refused to look at me or anyone else in the gallery. Amber sat a few feet away, looking small and terrified in her beige prison uniform. She had traded her stolen designer heels for rubber slides, and her defiance had been washed away by weeks in county jail, leaving only fear. The judge, a stern woman with glasses perched on the end of her nose, shuffled the papers on her bench before looking down at the defendants. "Dante Jenkins," she began, her voice filling the silent room, "you have been found guilty of wire fraud, tax evasion, and the embezzlement of funds from a miners' trust fund. These are crimes of greed and moral bankruptcy. You stole from your wife, you stole from the government, and worst of all, you stole from a child to fund a lifestyle you could not afford." Dante flinched as she spoke, but he remained silent. "I hereby sentence you to 5 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation." She announced, the gavel striking the wood with a sound that echoed like a gunshot. She turned her gaze to Amber. "Amber Davis, for your role in the conspiracy and for knowingly receiving and utilizing stolen assets." I sentence you to 2 years in a federal correctional facility. Amber let out a soft sob, burying her face in her hands, but the judge was not finished. She looked over her glasses at the back of the courtroom, where Marcus sat quietly holding a toy car in his hands. Regarding the custody of the minor child, Elijah Jenkins, the judge said, her voice softening slightly. The biological evidence is clear, however, the biological father will be incarcerated and the mother is unable to provide care. Marcus stood up slowly, clutching the toy car, his face weary but determined. Your Honor, he said, his voice steady, despite the pain clearly visible in his eyes. Elijah is innocent. He did not ask for any of this. He does not know who his biological father is. He only knows me. I am the one who fed him. I am the one who rocked him to sleep. I am his father in every way that matters. I am petitioning to adopt him and raise him as my own. I watched Marcus, a lump forming in my throat. He was the only Jenkins with a heart, the only one who understood the true meaning of family. He was choosing love over pride. He was saving that little boy from the sins of his parents. The judge smiled, a rare, genuine smile. Petition granted, Mr. Jenkins, she ruled. Elijah is lucky to have you. Finally, she turned to me, picking up the last document on her stack. Regarding the petition for divorce filed by Simone Jenkins, the court finds in favor of the plaintiff due to irretrievable breakdown caused by the defendant's adultery and financial misconduct. The prenuptial agreement is upheld in full. All assets previously titled to Simone Jenkins remain her sole property, including the proceeds from the sale of the marital home and all retirement accounts. She looked at me and nodded once, a gesture of respect. You are a free woman, Mrs. Jenkins. The gavel came down one last time, a sound of finality and liberation. I stood up, picking up my purse, feeling lighter than I had in a decade. I didn't look back at Dante, as the bailiffs led him away in handcuffs. I didn't look at Amber weeping on the table. I looked at Marcus, who gave me a small, sad nod of gratitude. Then I turned and walked down the center aisle, pushing open the heavy doors. Outside, the Atlanta sun was blindingly bright, warming my face. The air smelled of magnolia and exhaust fumes. But to me it smelled like oxygen, like possibilities. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the sweet, sharp taste of freedom. The war was over. The dragons had won, and for the first time in my life, the future was a blank page waiting for me to write it. The hum of Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport was usually a sound of stress for me, a reminder of rushed business trips, delayed flights, and the constant pressure of corporate deadlines. But today it sounded like a symphony. The rolling of suitcase wheels on the terrazzo floor, the announcements over the intercom, and the chatter of travelers all blended into a song of departure. I stood in the middle of the international terminal, holding 2 passports in one hand and my daughter's warm little hand in the other. We were standing at the precipice of a new life, staring up at the departure board, where the word Paris glowed in bright yellow letters. Maya was practically vibrating with excitement, bouncing on the balls of her feet. She was wearing a little beret. I had bought her a playful nod to our destination, and clutching her teddy bear like it was her ticket to the world. She looked up at me, her eyes shining with a light that had been dim for too long. Mommy, is the plane really going to take us across the ocean? She asked for the 10th time. Yes, baby. I smiled, adjusting the strap of my carry-on all the way across the ocean to a city where we can eat croissants for breakfast, and no one knows our names. Just as we turned to join the queue for the security checkpoint, my phone vibrated in my hand. It was a jarring sensation, an intrusion from a world I was trying to leave behind. I looked down at the screen and my heart skipped a beat. Not from fear, but from a sudden cold realization of how pathetic the past had become. The screen lit up with a notification from a number I did not have saved, but knew instantly it was an automated message from the correctional facility. Global Tel Link. attempting to connect a collect call from inmate Jenkins Dante. I stared at the name blinking on the screen. Dante was calling me from prison, probably using his one phone call to beg, or to blame, or to demand money he didn't have. He was reaching out from his cage, trying to drag me back into the darkness, trying to tether me to his misery. He probably thought I would answer out of guilt or curiosity. He thought he still had a hook in me. For a second, I remembered the man. I thought he was the man I married. But that image was like a ghost, dissipating in the bright lights of the terminal. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt absolutely nothing. I didn't decline the call. Instead, I stopped walking and stepped over to a sleek metal trash can near a pillar. I turned the phone over in my hands, popping the case off with a satisfying snap. I used my earring to eject the small SIM card, the tiny chip that held my old number, my old contacts, the digital footprint of the woman who had been cheated on and used. I held the SIM card between my thumb and forefinger, and with a quick, decisive movement, I snapped it in half, the plastic cracking with a sound that felt louder to me than a gunshot. It was the sound of the final chain breaking. I dropped the broken pieces into the trash can, watching them fall onto a discarded coffee cup. Then I dropped the phone itself right on top of them. I didn't need it anymore. I had a new phone in my bag, with a new number that only Marcus and my lawyer knew. I was not Simone the victim anymore. I was Simone the traveler. I walked back to Maya, who was watching me with curiosity. "Mommy, why did you throw your phone away?" she asked, tilting her head. "Because that phone was for the old life," I said, taking her hand again. "And we do not need old things where we are going. We only have room for new adventures." We walked up to the security officer. I handed him our passports, and he stamped them with a heavy thud that sounded like a seal of approval. On our freedom, we walked through the metal detectors, shedding our shoes and our jackets, shedding the weight of the last 7 years. As we gathered our things on the other side, walking toward the gate that would take us to France, Maya looked up at me, her face serious and thoughtful. "Mommy?" she asked, her voice quiet amidst the noise. "Are we free now?" I stopped for a moment, looking out the massive windows at the planes taking off, soaring into the clouds, defying gravity. I looked at my daughter, safe and happy and loved. I squeezed her hand, feeling the strength returning to my own bones. "Yes, my love," I said, a genuine smile spreading across my face, tears pricking my eyes. But they were happy tears, for the first time in forever. "We are free," I whispered. "Not just for today, but forever now. Let's go catch our flight. The world is waiting for us." The most profound lesson from Simone's journey is that silence is not weakness. It is preparation when faced with the ultimate betrayal. The natural instinct is to explode in rage. But Simone teaches us the devastating power of strategic patience. She demonstrates that true strength isn't about how loud you can scream, but how calculated you can be when the world tries to break you. Furthermore, this narrative serves as a stark reminder of the importance of financial independence and self-worth. Simone's ability to walk away and to burn the bridge behind her was rooted in her understanding of her own value. She refused to be a victim in her own story, proving that when you weaponize your intelligence rather than your emotions, you become unstoppable. The villains in our lives often mistake kindness for naivety, but as Simone showed, the most dangerous person in the room is the one who knows the truth and stays quiet until the checkmate. Ultimately, we learn that we do not need a prince to save us. We just need to remember that we have always been the dragon. If you are ready to stop waiting for a savior and start claiming your own power, hit that subscribe button and join our community of dragons today.